Okay, everyone, we're now live on YouTube. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Northamptonshire Schools Forum. As it's a new term of office for members, as we stated at the previous meeting, we do need to elect a chair and a vice chair at this time. I've received an expression of interest from James Burkett to continue as chair of the Northamptonshire Schools Forum. So could I please see a show of hands from all those members in favour of James continuing as the chair? Okay. Perfect, that's unanimous. So James, I'll hand over to you now as our chair.
Perfect, thanks very much, everyone. Yeah, and item number 2 is the election of the vice chair. And again, Paul Wheeler has indicated he'd be more than happy to stand again as vice chair. So if you would like to support that, if you could just raise your hand for Paul to continue as vice chair.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's unanimous again.
Great, thanks. Congratulations, Paul. Much appreciated. Great. We'll just move on to item number 3, which is any apologies for a non-attendance. And I think at the time Raj sent me the briefing notes that we didn't have any apologies. Is that still right, Raj?
Yeah, I've received no further apologies.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And then we do have a couple of forum membership changes. Raj, do you just want to go through those changes?
Yeah, sure. So Marie Lally has left the forum as her school has been academised. So I believe that falls under Rob's trust. And we've also had Rachel Gibbs join the forum, Millbrook Junior School, as a primary maintained member. As I said, she's having some IT issues currently, but should be able to join us shortly. And we also have Claire Tyrrell Smith joining from the Mainstream Academy as a Mainstream Academy member. So that's 2 new members.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks ever so much, Raj. And I think Rachel is struggling with some IT issues, so we'll join when she can. But I wondered if it would be a good idea, just for Claire's benefit, if we nip round and just introduce ourselves, so Claire knows who everybody is. So I'll just suggest we do that sort of in order that that everybody appears on my screen. So I'm James Burkett, obviously delighted to be voted in as chair of Northampton Schools Forum, and I'm also CEO of the Nen Valley Partnership, which is a small MAT just south of Wellingborough. Andrew, you're next on my screen.
Hi, Claire. Andrew Reid, Associate Director of Education for the Diocese of Peterborough.
And Soraya.
Hi, I'm Soraya, and I'm the Senior Finance Business Partner working on the DSG.
Thanks. Councillor Wright.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Councillor Elizabeth Wright. I'm the Executive Member for Children's, Families and Education for North Northamptonshire.
Hi.
Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Wheeler, just re-elected again as the Vice Chair for Schools Forum. I also Deputy Chief Executive of East Midlands Academy Trust. I chair West Northampton Schools Forum, and also work as a School Resource Management Advisor and sit on the LGPS pension scheme for Northamptonshire. So hopefully bring a collection of things to the forum.
Paul gets double the fun of Schools Forum. Yeah. Cornelia.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Cornelia Andrekat. I'm the new Executive Director of Children's Services, and I just wanted to come today, to this meeting and say hi, to introduce myself, and to say that I value you and that I look forward to working with you on the challenges in Northamptonshire to achieve our ambition for our children and for our schools. Thank you for having me today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Cornelia. Rob.
Thanks very much. I'm Rob Harkers. I'm CEO of Hatton Academies Trust. Like James, a small mixed trust within Wellingborough and between Wellingborough and Northampton.
Rob. Lee.
Hi, I'm Lee Hughes. I'm Chief Operating Officer of PDET, Primary Only Trust, 36 small or smaller primary schools. I'm also on one of the members of the DFE working groups. So we've got some of the fraud prevention and sort of the publication of the Academy's Trust Handbook within our group. So partially to blame for that horror of a document that we abide by in Academy land.
Thanks. Marsha?
Hi everyone, I'm Marsha, Head of Access and Sufficiency.
Catherine?
Good afternoon, Catherine Walker, Schools Finance Support Team Manager.
Thanks. Richard?
Hello, yeah, Richard Paul. I'm Schools Convener for Unison.
Thanks, Richard. And Raj, we should probably get you to introduce yourself too.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Raj Sohar. I'm a Scrutiny Officer at Northamptonshire Council and I support the Northamptonshire Schools Forum.
Right. Robert?
Hi, I'm Rob Tait, CFO for Inspiring Futures Through Learning, Academy member for School Forum. I'm a member of Milton Keynes School Forum, which is always good to have a different comparison. We're as a trust with about 21 schools with a number in Northamptonshire.
Thanks. Now it's really confused me because my screen has moved around slightly. Kelly?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly Gass and I'm the Early Years Strategic Lead.
Okay. Catherine Murphy?
Afternoon. I'm Catherine Murphy. I'm Principal of the Latimer Arts College in Kettering. And apologies if I need to nip in and out this afternoon. We're a little bit short-staffed in the senior team today, so but I'll be here for the important votes and as much of the afternoon as I can.
No problem. Thanks, Catherine. Amanda?
Afternoon, everybody. Amanda Butler, Assistant Director of Education at NNC. So lovely to see you all.
Right. Rochelle?
Afternoon, everybody. Rochelle Wilkins, Regional Officer with the GMB Trade Union.
Yoki?
Good afternoon. I'm Yoki O'Brien. I'm the Strategic Finance Business Partner for NNC Children's Services.
Thanks. Angela?
Thanks, James. Hi, Claire. I'm Angela Prodger. I'm the Head of Centre at Pen Green in Corby.
And Laura?
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Laura Clark. I'm the Head Teacher at Bradley Special School in Wellingborough.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. You'll be relieved to know, Claire, there's no test on any of those at the end of it. So thanks so much, everyone, for introducing yourself. Great. We'll move on to item number 4, which is the minutes of the meeting held in the summer, 10th of July, and any feedback from that. So first thing to ask members, is there any comments in terms of accuracy of those minutes? And we're also in the fortunate position is I don't think there's a huge amount of there's nothing really there for in terms of matters arising unless members have got anything that they would like to raise. Great. So if you could just sort of nod and thumbs up if you're happy that we accept those as an accurate thing. Perfect. Right, thank you. Item number 5 is the DSG monitoring update, and I shall hand over to Soraya.
Thank you, Chair. So this report gives an overview of the Q1 position across each DSG block and the key pressures. At Q1, we're forecasting an in-year deficit of 18.6 million compared to the agreed budgeted deficit of 19.4. Our cumulative deficit is at 40 million, taking into account the overspend over the last 2 years. This continues to be a major area of financial pressure for the council. The high needs block remains the key challenge. We're still seeing a growing demand for EHCPs and higher cost for placements, particularly in independent. We've been as an update on the high needs block as well. We've got a small working group together that's been working over the summer to pull together an MTFP plan, which will help to set the 26-27 budget, and that'll hopefully be brought to a meeting further down, probably December or the January meetings. We've also got in the monitoring, we've got the schools block, which is showing an underspend. But this was at Q1, so this has moved for Q2, and it will be, we'll kind of explain that a bit more in the growth fund update. We're, like I said, we're in the midst of Q2 monitoring, and that'll be brought to the December meeting, so these numbers will change. School Forum are asked to note this report. It's an information only report, and I'll open up to any questions if anyone's got any.
Any questions or comments for Soraya?
Yes, just I don't know if this is something you can answer at the moment, but I know we've talked previously, particularly as you said, the cost of provision, independence, and also the cost of tutoring. Has anything actually been actioned in terms of trying to reduce those costs?
So we're building an MTFP plan at the moment, which will take into account certain mitigations that we're going to pull together, which will kind of be about growing our own places and how we're going to kind of bring commissioning in to help with bringing those costs down. That's still a draft plan at the moment. There's been a working group that's helped over the summer to kind of pull all of this together. We haven't got anything to present at this stage to School Forum, but there is work going on behind the scenes.
Okay, what's the kind of timeline for that actually sort of?
It's helping to build the 26-27 budget, so we've got to bring budgets back in December. So you will have a draft high needs block budget by December.
Okay, and did that include the issue of tutoring as well as actual sort of the cost of provisions? Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Catherine. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, James. The report finishes, and I'm probably going off the first copy that came through, but on paragraph 4.13, it talks about whether the local authority has a deficit. They must provide information to DF about the pressures. In addition, there's a deficit which will have an adverse effect on the council's cash flow. It says which will result in investment income being lower. Work has been ongoing through a joint working group to develop this plan, which will be shared with the School Forum in due course. And I'm pleased that it will be shared with the School Forum. Can I just ask, are there any initial details you can give us in regard to that plan? Because it's clearly going to be a very important one, not only for the pupils within Northamptonshire, but also the schools as well.
Not at the moment. That's what I'm kind of discussing in that sense. There is a medium-term financial plan that we're pulling together, which will then allow us to kind of see more than just 1 year's budget. We're going to then kind of be able to bring something to School Forum where you can see how we can bring the curve down, in the sense that we can bring that the overspend down.
Thanks. So what you're saying is we'll take that as in the December forum meeting as presumably a fairly significant item there. Is that right?
We'll have a draft budget for the high needs block. I'm not sure how far we'll be with the DSG management plan in December, but we do need to bring a budget back in December for 26-27.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Soraya. Anything else on that item? Okay, we'll move to item number 6 then, which is the
James,
school.
can I just sorry?
Apologies.
That's okay. I just wanted to add the plan really is around the long-term forecasting, because there is a recognition there's a deficit. It is a challenge, obviously nationally and locally spend. So what we're trying to do as a collective is have a piece of forecasting where we can see 5 years, 10 years, with the aim of then bringing that down and looking how we can use sufficiency, how we can link with alternative provision, how we can link with send units, etc., so that we create a more viable space that is more cost effective. But at the moment, we need to piece all that together. And I think historically there's probably been a yearly plan, and that doesn't really obviously recognise the deficit. So the deficits, like nationally, are growing. So it really is about that forecast on the long term. It's just taking a little bit longer to bring all that together so that it is, accurate and effective in what we're trying to bring together. But as I say, it will come back regularly to Schools Forum over the next few months.
Perfect. Thanks, Amanda. Paul.
Thanks, James. I think as well, I'm sure Amanda will be conscious, and everyone, that with the white paper coming out, I think everyone's also wanting to feed in what comes out in the white paper and from the next round, which is supposed to be a multi-year round of funding from the DFE, which we haven't come on to it, but we haven't got the usual indication of what the national funding formula is, and no doubt that will be issued out sometime in December, unhelpfully. So it may or may not be there for the next meeting, but I suspect that if they're trying to do multi-year settlements, will kind of help inform where we are with the higher needs budgets going forward over multi-year time.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That is obviously interesting context to note, and I think, well, who knows what the white paper will bring, but I suspect there's recognition from the DFE and from all stakeholders actually that the current position in SEND is not just unsustainable for NNC, but right across the country. So yeah, it will be interesting how that works in terms of obviously what the white paper says and what that means for high needs funding and in the future. Great. I'll move on to item number 6 then, which is over to Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. So this afternoon I'm here to inform the Schools Forum of the current year's budget position based on the first 5 months of the financial year, so representing April to August. I believe in the past you actually had like with quarters. This time, as I had the information, I've done it over a month's basis. Just to say that obviously in late May, we did have budget submissions from 32 of the maintained schools. There is still one exception to actually, we haven't yet received a budget from one setting. The table then outlines the income and expenditure, but please note there are limitations due to the impending pay awards for both support staff and teachers. I just wish to highlight that. So as of month 5, we had a total of 9 schools that have been identified as operating in a deficit position. And obviously we are supporting those with the different challenges they actually face. So I've asked Schools Forum to note the current position, like I said, based on the period 5 monitoring, and then open up the forum for any questions.
Thanks. Angela.
Mine isn't a question, mine is just a comment, because obviously Penguin is the one with no submission. We've been working very closely with the local authority and consultants that were brought in for the local authority, and our advice at the time was not to submit a budget until we had finished the work with the consultants and the local authority.
Perfect. Thanks, Angela. That's useful to know.
Can I just hype that that's a non-submission of the actual monitoring return to ourselves, not the budget. We have received a budget and a budget plan from the centre. It's just the monitoring that we haven't actually yet received.
Okay, thank you, Catherine.
Okay.
That's probably one to kind of follow up, I guess, outside of the meeting.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, can I just say you mentioned about the kind of schools receiving support, and obviously it's fair to say it's clearly a kind of a worsening picture for maintained schools. I do know that we've had some licensed deficit panels that members of this forum have also supported in. It just might be helpful to outline kind of what that support looks like, I guess, on a more general level, but also with that point of, how do we make sure that we're trying to catch things really early? Because the interesting thing about sitting on some of those panels has been that, obviously they occur when schools are already in a really difficult position. And I guess, the holy grail is how we make sure they don't get themselves into that really difficult position in the first instance. So yeah, Amanda, I was
going to say, I'll defer to Amanda on one element, but I may pick up other elements following on from that.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Over to you, Amanda.
Thank you both. Yes, so I think there's been some historic deficits that have been placed, and some schools have presented deficit budgets for a number of years. The piece of work was done sort of led by finance initially, and sort of looking to develop a licensed deficit process. So yes, as you're right, James, you've sat in on a couple of those sessions. So just to sort of qualify, in 24-25, schools were invited to go to the licensed deficit panel, and then following that, conversations were then had at said panel, and then a response written to schools with either further questions and or clarification, equally proposals around what they could do next, and then an updated budget was then presented. For those schools that were then unable to then present a balanced budget, that then brings into the work with education effectiveness around what we call a TRIP process, which is a target rapid improvement process, so a plan where there's close alignment with governance and with the school effectiveness team and working with the head teacher, the school business manager, and the chair of governors, and looping in with finance. And that then becomes a really detailed plan of actually support about how to not only look at the budget, but also the leadership and governance around that, because obviously presenting a viable budget is linked to leadership and governance as well. So there's been some support that is put in place with that. And then that process runs for sort of anything from sort of 18 weeks to 18 months, really, and whatever the school may need. And at various points that there are opportunities to discuss, explore, etc. That's been further enhanced this year with work with finance, with Catherine. She has her monitoring visits, and there's been reports that are then shared with education effectiveness, which I think is a really good positive step forward. And then following that, obviously, there are regular opportunities to move towards a viable budget. If obviously there are challenges further on, then there's obviously the support and intervention from the DfE, and there's very clear guidance around that. But our approach has been very much that positive, working together and working with schools. What we've also identified with finance through Catherine's support as well is those schools that are amber, because we have some red schools and they're the ones that were historically at a deficit. And what we've done this year is move towards those amber schools. And Catherine, our governance expert and school effectiveness, are then working on training and support, and then those sort of workshop sessions with chairs and head teachers to try and I suppose provide that opportunity for that conversation and that constructive challenge, and how they can look at their budgets differently. And what we found is there are some budgets that challenges linked to those schools that have additional sort of alternative resource provisions or send units, and it's working out the budgets around those. And quite a few have gone into deficit because they have falling roles. So again, that sort of brings in some of the work that Marsh has been doing with her team as well, around trying to do the preventative piece of work. So the changes for this year, which I'm sure Catherine can add to, are this look at the amber schools and the ways in which we can start to prevent schools from going through this process, because again, it is a challenge. We're updating the terms of reference around the licence deficit, and updating the communication that goes out to schools around that in an attempt to sort of make them more aware, and also to bring around those conversations around leadership and governance and school organisation, and support perhaps also if you are needing to look at a different structure around your school, what stages you might need to go through for that, and how then we might encourage schools to involve unions with that as well, if it does lead to workplace consultation. There's lots of aspects within that that we're trying to develop this year, so it's more, I suppose, clear for schools on what process they can use.
Brilliant, thanks, Amanda.
Can I, James? Can I just
Please do, yeah.
Chip in there? Yeah. So following on from what Amanda says, the way we identified amber schools were those that when they submitted their budget plan for this year, their 3-year budget plan, they used either 100% or a large percentage of their carry forward just to set that balanced budget. So what we thought we'd do is, like I said, Amanda said, I'm working with school effectiveness governance with a workshop where we've invited these schools to try some early intervention, because obviously the sooner they sort of accept where they're heading, we can then probably give them some strategies or some suggestions of what they might want to look at to try and mitigate the situation, rather than them arriving at deficit. And it's like, oh, now and that was something that was identified quite recently from schools that had been invited to panel, that they would have welcomed greater support earlier on. So that's where we're trying to move it to. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Catherine Murphy, I saw your hand up. Has that been answered? Or?
I think it probably has. I was just interested in how much of it was to do with falling roles and how much of it was just still trying to get out of the historic deficit, and whether falling roles in the future had been taken into consideration. But it sounds like we're looking at those ones at risk anyway. So
yes, we're very much so. I mean, which is why we've also deferred it until after the census, so we've got a much greater, clearer picture of what trajectory they're facing.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for that. The detail we've just received. I was going to ask the same question about falling roles in the context of long-term planning, because it is absolutely critical. And I appreciate the further west we go, the more chronic that problem's becoming. So I think that's been answered though. But the main question I was going to ask is there an element of consideration of the strong structures that these individual schools are sitting within? And that's not a veiled promotion of academies or any other particular structure, but it does seem to me that in the context of looking at which schools are struggling, it would be true to say, I think Lee would agree, there's no such thing as a license deficit in academy world. So we have to bear in mind that there's a difference in the approach being taken to making sure that strong structures lead to strong support. So could I just have that assurance, please? Is there a dimension with governors and with heads that we're talking about structures, not just individual school budgets?
Do you want that one, Amanda? Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, just to reassure you that it's a widespread conversation. So we do have some academies that have falling roles, and there are some sort of challenges around that as well, and conversations that we're starting to have on like a CEO tour. And I know from being an academy head that there were schools within my trust that actually were presenting license deficits. So I think it can be a challenge in either sort of spheres. But yeah, the aim is really to look at the prevention, to look at the support, and look at the wider structure, and in a sense see the local authority schools as their own trust, because there's 28 of them plus the 4 nurseries. So it's looking to see about the economies of scales and different ways in which we can work within those spaces. But again, focusing, as Catherine said, on that prevention, because actually we have birth data, we have falling role data, and our data team are fantastic. What we need to be doing moving forward is just utilising that so that we're informing schools and looking at their PAN and looking at PAN reduction, looking at admissions, and different ways in which we can support schools, as you say, more of a wider piece.
Okay. I'm less convinced about the efficacy of the way that schools are working together really strongly in a way that that formal federations or academies might afford. Because we're not talking about single employer efficiencies or single employer flexibilities, are we? We're still talking about separate budget setting. And I do take your point about deficits within academies, although you might argue that is within a single budget allocation distribution rather than individual schools seeking licenses. But thank you.
It's certainly something we can take away, though, and thank you to review.
Robert.
Hiya. Yeah, but I'm just intrigued about what the consequence of, if I've picked that right, there's a deficit position, net deficit position for school, what the consequence or risk retains on the council for trading in a position of deficit. It talks about the early intervention and improvement, but it looks like it's worsening. I just wondered what's the impact in the overall financial position for the council for sponsoring as such those schools in deficit.
Finance, you want to come in first and then I add in? Yoki or Catherine?
I don't really have an answer to that one, in so much that we are looking, obviously, in trying to support those schools to bring their deficit back to a manageable position, but that is very much on a ad hoc, school by school basis, rather than anything overall, overarching council.
What I can say from the 2 trips that are underway, so one is a federation, and then one is well, there's 4 schools in total, and they work together. All of those from the trip process are being reduced, and their mitigation before, and the risk has been drastically reduced by the intensive support that's been offered. So that's our model so far. That's what we're trying. That's our new process, and we're seeing really positive dividends from that. So that's the aim of rolling that out, so that all of the schools that have a deficit at present will be going through that process, that sort of targeted support. Obviously, like any school, if you're working through a financial mechanism and then you're not seeing an improvement, and you have maybe questions around governance, you have questions about other things, and then you're referring to the DFE support and intervention, because there are obviously other avenues that you could follow. But at the moment, our focus is on supporting schools, working with schools really closely, and what we're seeing is a really positive return on that time and that effort. And again, a way of educating and upskilling chairs of governors and business managers and head teachers about this. That there are schools nationally that are going through falling roles, and some schools are closing in some local authorities. So what we're trying to do is create a positive space where schools can become viable. and perhaps be alive to the changing situation around, organisation and around staffing.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I wonder if it'd be interesting for this item on a future forum. I'm really mindful of Andrew's point, and I think kind of as Robert says, what the risks are, and then you describe the sort of local authority schools as almost like kind of operating on a mat, and are the things that the council would consider in terms of I don't know, like providing for all of the schools, like something like a HR service or whatever that looks like, that most MATs would have as part of their offer, or if that's not desirable or possible, it would be interesting to hear, I guess, a kind of rationale for council's decision making, because you can really hear the work that's going in at an individual school level, and it is great that that's kind of bearing fruits, and that is necessary as well. It's not an either or, but are there any levers that you could do to think actually they will get better value for money if actually we operate a kind of group procurement for certain features? I think that would be interesting. And if it's a no, because I also understand why there might be reasons that the council wouldn't wish to do that, which is why a lot of local authorities moved away from it in the first instance, is what is the rationale for that? So it's a kind of clearly, I guess, a conscious decision rather than just one of circumstance.
Yeah, there's something different we can take away, and I can bring back to a later forum, really, that discussion around that. And we consult every year, so that's obviously something as well we can look at to see what the response would be, whether it would be viable and where we can do that. But we can definitely bring that back.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Paul.
Thank you. Thanks, James. I think to the point Andrew was making earlier, and just foreign colleagues' information as well, I think it's useful. I've sat on, as has James, a few of the licence deficit panels, and when talking about the rigour versus that we see in the academy sector, I have to say, all credit to the officers present. The previous approach from years gone by always felt like tea and sympathy and not actually robust conversations. I think James would agree, when we sit on the licence deficit panels, there's real help and real desire to identify how to solve the problem, and quite fair but robust conversations in there from the panel members and from officers. So I think that historically that just simply wasn't there, and that is why we're seeing problems that have drifted probably for too long, which are now schools are being supported to enable them to improve their financial performance. So I do see that rigour in the system now, but it most certainly wasn't there 18 months ago.
Yeah, agreed, Paul. Absolutely. Thanks for raising that. I would completely agree with that. Perfect. Thanks. We should move on. So item 7 is over to Marcia and an update on Growth Fund.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, all. I'm going to talk you through Growth Fund, update on where we are and our planned forecast. So for our primary growth, we are expecting 255 places this academic year. For next year, 120 places. We are still reviewing our data, so 27-28 to be confirmed. In terms of secondary, we are looking at the current growing in Wellingborough. So we are looking at approximately 668 places for this academic year, 372 for next year, and 252 for 27-28. Just to add in, at the end of what I'm running through now, I will walk the forum through with the actual process, how we arrive at school at Growth Fund, because this is almost the output, but it's also important just to understand and share the process, how we arrive at this. So in terms of our forecast, we are forecasting to spend for 25-26, 2.3 million on our growth funding. That forecast has been revised subsequent to our recent SCAP submission. So there are some additional school places that are required for this academic year. Our new and growing schools, they continue to be Glenvale, Wilby, and Stanton Cross. And in terms of our secondary new and growing schools, it is Weldon Village Academy. In terms of monitoring, I have put a new system in that I am monitoring the weekly in-year school admissions data, because this is crucial to understanding what is happening on the ground. So we're not reviewing our data on an annual basis. It is now being reviewed week to week, month to month. Also looking at our housing development information, our SCAP data. I have recently formed a growth fund working group. And again, that will be 3 times throughout the year. And it's just to follow and track the journey of growth fund, because it is a journey. You know, we do forecast on forecasts. So whilst with the best intentions, I know what I want for 25, 26, 26, 27, dependent on migration into the country, into the area, things do change. So I felt it important to get that group up and running, just so we've got that extra rigor and that transparency in this space. So my recommendation is for Schools Forum to accept and support the Growth Fund for this year. I'm happy to take any questions now, or if Chair, if you'd like me to run through the organisation strategy first, because I think that gives some background to the Growth Fund paper. Entirely up to you. We can do it separately, but that's just a run through of the Growth Fund and what we are forecasting for the next couple of years.
Yeah, so what you'd like to do, Marsha, is just talk us through your organisational strategy now prior to questions. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and I think as well that does lean into some of the comments that were raised earlier in terms of the actual planning around sufficiency, growth, and falling roles. It's important to share that up until now we haven't had a organisation strategy since I think it's 2018 or 2019, and this is the education strategy that underpins sufficiency in Northants. So I have developed this new strategy. It is quite a long strategy, but it's really important because it underpins the work we do for place planning with schools. It supports schools to expand in a way that meets housing and demographic growth. It provides adequate capacity by creating the right number of school places. Where possible, then there may need to be capital expansions. And it also supports parents and young people being able to attend schools in their community. So the demographic forecasts that feed into the organisation strategy is the child health data, our school census data, and the housing development forecast that we know we've got coming down the track. We need to understand the medium-term pressures. So whilst this is a new strategy that I am setting up, we need to understand where we are now. Some of the work has been reactive. We are in a much better place now, I am pleased to share, because we are now looking at not so much silo working, but we're working as a team on this, because it covers housing, it covers admissions, the performance analysis team, schools transport. It covers a broad range of colleagues across the county. And we also look at our current net capacity for each schools. And it's also important to engage with stakeholders. I have met with some locality heads just to talk this through, just so they can understand what our planning is around this. Because with recent conversations we've just had about falling roles and how do we alert schools to this well in advance of it coming, this is the part of the work that I'm doing. So in my team, we are developing our place planning team. So, you know, we can meet schools, we can share the data, we can give advice, and just so schools actually know what is coming down the track. And also for growth, where there is growth expected, we have a number of new schools on the horizon. So there will be some growth. So again, it's just understanding all of that and sharing that information with schools. So there are no surprises, if you like. So where I'm at with the strategy, it is in draft. I did have soft workshops earlier in the year with locality head teachers. It is going to executive in December. We then are planning a more formal consultation, which will go out to schools and other stakeholders just to share and engage what people are thinking about the strategy. But this is the plan moving forward. The strategy won't be revised each year, but the appendices that I include, which is the SCAP data, update on sufficiency, falling roles, that will be updated annually. And then that gives us all a really good platform to plan our sufficiency, to plan if we do need capital. So finance are in the loop. They do have a leading time as to what do we need when we need it. So again, this is an important piece of work that I have been leading on. It is near completion, but I just want to share that this is what happens before we get to growth funding, because it's out of this piece of work that we understand where do we need growth and why we need growth. And there are a number of reasons why we need growth, and we still are trying to understand, because we've had a surge, if you like, increase in applications last year that has seemed to have dipped off this year, but we are monitoring it. And I am trying to keep schools abreast of what I'm doing and almost taking them on the journey. So it was important that I brought this to Schools Forum just to share the journey, and then I welcome any questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Martha. Yeah, thank you. And I think, yeah, Forum will be pleased to hear that. I think, you know, the concern about the setting of the growth fund has always been, you know, how do we arrive at the total growth fund figure that's being asked for, particularly as, you know, we're aware that kind of in a way can't be carried over and just basically went to slightly offset the deficit. So I think accuracy of forecasting would certainly be appreciated. Catherine.
Can I just ask a question about 4.3, the table there? Obviously, it's a little bit, it's always a little bit difficult to get those. You've got a financial year and an academic year that don't marry up. That looks like you've got 106 extra places needed in Kettering for, is that the year 27-28 academically?
Yes.
And how, given that I've seen just this week a letter from Monsai consulting about reducing their PAN, and unless I've missed something, there's no evidence of a secondary school being built at Hanwood Park in anybody's lifetime. Where can those places come from?
So this table continues from the expansion from last year. So it's a continuation. So last year we expanded KSA, Kettering Science Academy. That was expanded last year. So this table isn't a new table. We are just reporting on what the forecast was last year. So this is
both of those were permanent increases in PAN rather than what we've done, which is a 2-year extra class.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that should cover. If they both took an extra class,
that should cover it. Yes.
Okay. And I'm assuming I'm right that there isn't a Hanwood Park build imminent.
So we do have. So there has been free Hanwood Park Secondary free school that has been in the pipeline, which predates me. I think that was from 2021. So there are still ongoing conversations with the DfE surrounding that, because that's a free school. So that falls under the remit of the DfE. But we meet regularly with them. So that's always a feature in where are we with Hamwood Park Secondary Free School.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll let me know if you hear anything.
Thanks. Laura.
Yeah, thank you, James. Marsha, I wonder, and I know it links with the previous item, but the prediction around growth, obviously, percentage of these, for all of the reasons that you've outlined, children coming into the county will need special school places. Are those numbers built into this, or where do they sit within the strategy?
So they are within the strategy, but they are outlined differently. So we are doing a big piece of work at the minute in terms of looking at what our AP and our SEND sufficiency need is. So there is a separate piece of, it's a different type of methodology that our performance team use, which calculates the trajectory of growth, where we are now, and what places we need to ensure that we, stem the growth and that we can manage the growth without having to send our children to out of county places. I am heavily involved in that piece of work. I'm probably fair to say I am leading some of it. It does tie into the mainstream sufficiency, because whilst I'm looking at both, I am looking at in the future where we do have falling roles and classes, schools where there are empty classes, how can I somehow develop a strategy so that I can bring it all together? I'm also looking at vacant buildings in Northamptonshire to support with our AP and SEND sufficiency need. So there is a number of work streams that is currently being undertaken to look at this, because we all know the growth with AP and SEND in Northamptonshire. We know that we are bursting at the seams, if that's the right way to phrase it, but there is some active work being undertaken by officers to manage that sufficiency and increase it.
Thank you. I do recognise how complex it is and how difficult it is to make those predictions. But I think to sit it in context, our school's gone from 58 children on roll to 314 over just 10 years, really. So, you know, the growth is very, very difficult to manage. So I do know that. So if there's anything we can do to help or support, please do say.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Rob.
Thanks, James. Thanks for the paper. Actually, it's really useful to read through and very clear, I thought, in terms of not only what's happening right now, 25-26, but also as we move forward into 26-27. We obviously, as a forum, are aware that the overall budget for 25-26 was 3.6 million, and that was quite a large amount more than the previous year, which was also a large amount more than the year before that. Given that you've mentioned two things, one, in the report you look at the figures for 26-27 and they look like they are slightly decreasing. I recognise that you've said there can be some variations on these, but you've kind of got, I'm being really rough here, but you've kind of got a halving of the numbers of places you think you will need as you move into 26-27. And you've also mentioned the fact that we've got falling roles. Do you foresee the need to come back next year for the similar sort of amount in terms of the overall growth fund pot?
I'm probably going to say no. However, I do think as we travel throughout the year and I have those growth fund meetings, I'll be able to better understand and share the journey. Because if I'm honest, Rob, some of it is crystal balling. Because whilst we have a forecast, we do look at the forecast on our actuals each year, which gives us a really good indication of how far on or off. And I think this year we were literally 1% off. So in terms of what I'm forecasting or what I think I'm forecasting for next year, I don't envisage that it will be what I've asked for last year. It will be less. However, the termly meetings, growth fund meetings, will take us through that journey, because I am going to be asking some head teachers to join that those termly meetings as well. So it's not just my officers and me saying, but, you know, some colleagues are on the call, involved in those conversations as well. Because again, for transparency and rigor, it is important that we demonstrate where we are, why, you know, things do change, but it's important just to track that change throughout the year. And then I can report at these school forum meetings.
Thanks, Marsha. We'll probably just do a final comment on this. I'm just slightly aware of time, so over to you, Andrew.
I'll be really quick. I agree with Rob and others. Thank you, Marsha. I thought it was a really helpful paper and a much more strategic approach perhaps than we've had before. So we appreciated that. My question was about wider regional planning. We spend a lot of our time, don't we, chasing planning decisions made in a much wider context in terms of investment, commercial investment, housing developments, other kind of strategic positives about the area. Have you been able to, and are you being well supported by other parts of the council, parts of other planning authorities in terms of, so that we're not constantly chasing this investment comes before infrastructure challenge that we have?
Thanks, Andrew. I'm smiling because I've recently been invited to planning meetings, which is looking at planning for North Northants over the next 20 to 25 years. So yeah, I have been invited. The first workshop meeting is at the end. It's next week. So they are starting to understand that this planning needs to start way ahead of when bricks are coming off the ground. So we need to get my team more involved much earlier on. So my short answer is yes, I am now going to be going to planning meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks everyone. Marsha, next item is back to you again, I think, for school condition allocation.
Thank you, Chair. So this is another policy that I have introduced. It's still currently in draft. I did want to bring it to Schools Forum because it involves schools. So annually we get a budget from the DfE, the School Condition Allocation Budget, which is for maintained schools. It's designed to support schools for critical issues. So the focus on health and safety, compliance, operational use, and it applies to local authority main schools. But it's also the policy. I do want to ensure that schools are managing the day-to-day maintenance and compliance as well throughout the year. So the policy seeks to understand what we will spend the allocation on and what we won't spend the allocation on. And it's probably a bit of a reset so that schools understand what it should be used for, you know, when we can actually step in and support schools. And one of the key things that I am doing now with our capital team is rolling out a condition survey program. So historically, we have had condition surveys done for some schools. It has been some done here, some done there. It hasn't been synced. So now we are literally starting afresh and going to be doing stock surveys for all of our schools. So we've got a level playing field. So we understand which schools are in category 1, for example, which fall in category 2, and where we need essential refurbishment works. And then we will program that through a number of years, utilising the condition allocation grant. And then schools are aware, you know, wherever they fall into the category, when they can expect that work to be completed by us. I'm pleased that we have this because in terms of the DfE grants, it is audited. We do need to account for it each year. We do have a new tracker system that finance have put in place for us. So there is much more rigor, if you like, around this allocation and how it is spent. And again, when things do go wrong, because sometimes things just do go wrong, that we do have that buffer in the background to support schools where needed. So in summary, that is the policy. I would like to take your thoughts and views on it before it goes out to schools. I am keen for any feedback, whether it's at this meeting or taken offline. I would welcome that. So any questions or comments, Chair?
Thanks. I mean, the only thing I'd say is I think, it's absolutely right that you do have that policy. I'm sure that will be very helpful, and the kind of, the fact you've actually got some criteria and a formal process for requests. I don't know quite what came before, but I can see how this would be helpful for schools. Catherine.
How often, apologies if it's in the policy, Marsha, how often would you expect schools to have a condition survey?
Typically 4 to 5 years.
Okay.
So I think once we do the first round of surveys now, we'll be able to gauge what the issues are, and then what the time frame is to remedy some of the issues. But I think typically 4 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
Thanks, James. I'm going to ask the silly question, which you probably be able to put to bed straight away, Marsha. But is any of this affected by any schools in Northamptonshire that are PFI? Or are there any schools in Northamptonshire? This is not affected by it at all?
No.
Okay, that's perfect.
Just our maintained schools.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Right, Andrew.
Thank you, Marsha, again. A lot of schools, of course, have done quite comprehensive condition surveys themselves. I mean, they are traditionally quite expensive to do properly. I just wonder if we are making sure that, and I appreciate you'd need to QA what whether it had parity with that which you would be expecting for your information. But I'm just encouraging, if not, to make sure that we are taking existing information that's there. I mean, as it happens, I know a large proportion of the church schools have had very substantial surveys undertaken between £3,000 and £5,000 a piece. So, which I'm sure could be shared and result in a cost saving, and they are contemporary. They're recent.
Thank you, Andrew.
Will you be asking schools for that? I mean,
yes.
I mean, what concerns me, Chair, is I think across this whole piece. And Lee, I'm interested in what Lee might have to say about this, given the work that's been done at PDET at scale, because the unaffordable elephant in the room, which of course is important but impossible, is the net zero carbon dimension. And it seems to me that this kind of work also needs to result in us to be able to make a completely summative observation about the cost needed to be spent, the investment needed on all school estate across Northamptonshire. So that would include academies, maintained schools, the whole lot. Just to put it into some kind of context, when that problem really starts to raise its head, which I would argue is already happening, which is the massive shortfall we have in the capital available to keep the whole school estate up to date. So it'd be great to have information across the whole of Northamptonshire, wouldn't it? And that might include asking the academies to share their statistics, because most of the academies that I've been involved with have done condition surveys. I think you have, haven't you, Lee?
Yeah. I mean, what I'd say is obviously the issue you're going to have with any sort of level of consistency here is the lens at which you engage with your surveyors, right? So I'm sure if you take someone like Paul or Rob here in their trusts, or indeed James, when we go out, we look for certain things because of our infrastructure with our academies and what we're doing. So to get that, that'd be great, wouldn't it? You'd have a central place where you could put every single survey. It's all done in that sort of consistency, and everyone know where they stand. The reality of that is there's a whole commercial element to this and funding. But I mean, I think we can all agree there's just not enough. There's not enough money to do everything. So that's not. It probably doesn't need stating. A very difficult task to try and get that consistency, I think.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, James. Sorry. Yes, I think the report's a very good report, Marsha, and taking on Andrew's point as well, it might be worth just considering there's bringing in elements related to what would need to be done in relation to carbon reduction. because they are two separate ways of looking at it. Obviously, the Department for Education did the CDC surveys and CDC2 surveys, and that informs how they allocate, depending on the partially informs how they allocate funding for SCA, because it's based on the feedback that goes into it. As with a number of things the department do, it doesn't feed in, because the CDC condition surveys have 4 condition types. The SCA conditions that determine where you sit and to what percentage of money you'll get allocated are done over about 20. They're literally 24 different types. So although the one's supposed to inform the other, they have 2 very separate categories and categorizations that make it impossible to be able to track across. The other side of it is which the CDC2 helps inform the funding, but effectively it's an unintrusive survey, as most condition surveys are non-intrusive, which means that essentially when you open up a building, you can find there's all sorts of problems that even with recent surveys just simply don't pick up. But I think this is it's a really good document. I would say just have a look to see how you filter in carbon reduction into it from there. There's a good, just so the former members, if you're not aware of it, in 2023, I think it was either 2021 or 23, the National Audit Office did a big report on schools and schools' condition. And in that, they noted that about a third of schools are beyond their design lifespan. And there would need to be a significant rebuilding program to be able to even just, never mind getting everything up to the current building regulation standard, but just being able to, those buildings that are life expired, do something with those and upgrade those. But the National Audit Office report is worth a read. I've read it, and it paints a picture, a sorry picture, and an underfunded picture in there, and it states to the extent of how many billion the estate's underfunded to bring it into the condition that would be required.
Thanks, Paul. Back to you, Lee.
Yeah, I mean, slightly tenuous link really, but I think the new anti-fraud regulations are now classifying things like greenwashing as a problem, right? So this is only going to get more and more important to have a line in somewhere to say this is the approach, this is what we're going to take in terms of how we're going to decarbonise our estates and be true to it and ensure it's the data gathering and the reporting element of it that is so important with our estates. And we can't get alignment from one school to another in what we should do, and that is the gap really. That's the big gap. As soon as you put it into regulation like they have done, we've got a remit to report on it, haven't we? So tenuous to this point really, but it's only going to get stronger in that space.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Thank you. Okay, and Marsha, I'm assuming that obviously what you're saying, this is in draft, and then presumably you'll take some of that feedback and then bring to forum the complete policy when that's ready to go. Yeah, perfect. Great, thank you. I'll move on to item number 9, which is over to Kelly for early years update.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a really short report to inform Schools Forum of a process pilot that we've implemented in service into our childcare providers. The previously known SEND process, SENIF Plus, has moved into the early years space. We're currently running a pilot where we've amalgamated the old SENIF Plus into early years SENIF to create a Band C. So we've got Band A, which is group children SEND funding. That's to support funded children who are in childcare providers across North Northants. Band 2 is individual, so those are slightly more complex children who might require some additional support in a setting. And the newly formed Band C, which will include some targeted adult support from services or professionals specifically for funded children from 9 months to school age effectively. or if you're delayed and deferred, you can still get it in a setting. We've got a full application form, full web presence on our website. We've been taking applications since the beginning of September. Currently, we're funding this through early years block. We will be, when I write the report for the funding rates, that will hopefully be live in December, I'll be bringing to Schools Forum a change in process and also any cost implications to early years block. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Amanda.
Yeah, and just to sort of caveat, obviously it's a pilot process, and sometimes, as you know, co-production can't always happen before something is introduced. So we're running this for 2 funding blocks, and then in December we're aiming to have a full sort of co-produced piece with our MPCV and SendIAS to look at really that, and with some stakeholders as well, so we can look at how we're using it and how we're utilising the space going forward, to really take on board that sort of stakeholder view. And also another reason for this as well, being mindful of cost. The Senate Plus process was running at a deficit. It's important that we're viable really with our funding. So again, this is now coming under that early year space with that 0 to 5, which then lines with the process of change within NNC, which is to bring early years all together, so that you've got the funding, you've got the advisory work, and you've also got that portage team all working together, all having that synergized approach really. So I think it's a really positive step, and it's an opportunity to explore different ways of working. So thank you, Kelly.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks, Kelly. Any other questions, comments on that? Okay, we shall move on to the next item, number 10, which is permanent exclusions update. And there's an update here, but also contained within here is the question of what the local authority would like to put in terms of the consultation question out about, particularly about clawback. So I think, Amanda, this is the first of a long list of items with your name against it. So over to you for this one.
Yes, this is a very busy forum for me, but yes, here we go. So this is obviously a policy that's been in place for 23 and 24. So it's just really bringing back that guidance around clawback and permanent exclusion sort of guidance. And the process that's outlined in the support and intervention, as well as legislation, which is under, as I've mentioned, under Chapter 3, Section 15 of the purpose of the clawback. Obviously, from 6th day, the local authority is responsible for pupils that have been excluded. So it's really important that we have a process whereby we can fund that for obviously Section 19 duties, but ensuring that we are able then to support through alternative provision or through another placement, or ideally back into another mainstream setting. So really the policy outlines the process and what the funding is used for. It equally completely follows legislation in the sense of the clawback around the ORPU, free school meals, etc. I've added a table at the back, which is for the 25-26 figures within the local authority, as well as linked obviously to the national funding formula. And the proposal is really, I've sent a consultation out to schools. It only closed on Friday, and I've subsequently had a few more comments. So I'll bring that back to the next forum, because obviously I want an opportunity to collate that and respond, which is what it says in the policy. So yeah, really it's just recommendations for forum to agree to the proposed policy, obviously in line with the consultation. So that isn't an agreement to say it's adopted now, because obviously we need to do full transparent consultation. It's just to guide you on, this is the proposal, and then to note that this will come back in December following consultation outcomes and that update. But also just to note on page 41 about the legal implications, obviously, of not aligning, and also the risks if not agreed, then obviously as a local authority, we wouldn't be adhering to legislation. I've then subsequently added a copy of the consultation, which there were a few glitches with, which is why I've been taking extra comments. And then I've just added in the exclusion and suspension guidance that I compiled in the summer and shared with head teachers and also vice and vice chair of Schools Forum. And then subsequently we rolled that out this term. Any questions? Sorry, over to you, Chair.
It's all right. Amanda, I was just going to clarify, this might be for you or it might be for Raj. So because there's an element of the consultation here, did forum members need to vote to say we are happy for this to go this policy and the clawback amounts to go to consultation, that's basically what goes on the paper. I'm assuming with all of those we need to agree that. Is that right, Amanda?
Yes, so this is generally the proposal. It's gone out to consultation, so then the decision would be in the December meeting based on feedback and responses. It's just really to cite people on the process and the legality around it, really, that it all fits in with the DFE.
Yeah. Paul.
Thank you. Thanks, James. Amanda, just one question or point of clarity. I wanted to act on this because I know there have been problems in the past around the clawbacks and then having to pay back some clawbacks. So just on the policy, I fully support the policy, by the way. But on the amounts we're referring to the ORPU and the other amounts which tie into the DFE policy. But my question is, schools, particularly over the current year and maybe next year, schools don't receive that money because we've got a top slice and sometimes we put a cap in. So as I understood it, the policy was essentially whatever money you get for that child that's been excluded, you pay back from the period of time based on a percentage formula when that's been excluded. But these rates are the national funding formula rates, or they look like them to me, not necessarily the rates that the school actually has, because if there's a cap and a scale and a transfer to high needs as well overall, then which results in the cap and scale, then they're not receiving that. Have we taken that into account, and are we confident that by applying the rates that we've set out here, we won't fall foul of the fact that schools could question it and say, we never got that money, so we are going to legally challenge the clawback? That's the question I've asked.
Yeah, so in the sense of, I think, as you noted, historically, this hasn't maybe been actioned as well as it could be. And I think that there's often been quite a significant lag before the local authority has gone back to a school to ask for funding, which again has caused challenges because it could be in the next year. So what NNC have currently been doing is applying sort of for the clawback the term after, just in case the child is returned or just in case the exclusion is withdrawn. So there's then been a cancellation, or rather a pause in the request for funding. The funding on the page 40 from has been, the data team put together a formula whereby it is already pre-populated with our figures. So it will then be a pro rata amount from when the child is excluded. And then obviously the national funding form is the appendices. But yeah, so that it will be a pro rata amount based on when the child is then excluded from a termly basis. I can ask finance colleagues, Sarai, whether you want to bring in any more additional, because you've been working with Sasha on this.
Yeah, I'll have to take your question back, Paul, and find out about the capping and the scaling, if that's taken into account when they run the formula. But we can feed that back through Raj.
Or I can add it onto an updated version anyway in December.
Yeah, great. I mean, I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's the belt and braces approach to making sure it's enforceable, so you don't have a repeat of what happened with the prior clawback. And yeah, I don't know whether that's the DFE or whether that's your legal team to say, actually, where would we stand on that if somebody said, well, actually, we don't quite get that amount of money for the following reasons. Yeah, Catherine.
I think I'm following on from that because I know that previously, certainly one of the trusts got legal advice and didn't pay the clawback. And whilst I don't entirely understand what the legality of what they stated, it was about the school budget share. So I'm assuming it was exactly that they didn't have the whole ORPU as a school, and therefore to pay back the whole ORPU wasn't necessarily fair. I fully understand the purpose of this, but again, I just would like to say, and I get the pro rata thing, that makes sense. If you're only having them for half the year, you should only have half the money. However, there are aspects of the funding that you do spend in advance. So Obviously, your staffing is based on having them. When you've got a student who's pupil premium, you buy them uniform, equipment, devices, all of that at the beginning of the year. So the pro rata thing is a bit of a blunt tool, and I don't know if there's a better one, but I think it certainly needs either acknowledging or just re-looking at in terms of actually for schools that can be really quite damaging if you lose somebody early on in the year and you've had a significant financial outlay and then you're having to pay it back.
Yeah, and I can certainly also look into, I appreciate the figures around free school meals and around pupil premium, but a significant percentage wouldn't fall into that category. So again, it's the fact that obviously as a local authority, we need to then fund alternative provision for these young people that are then excluded. So that money needs to come from somewhere. So if the child isn't placed with the school, then it is fair, I suppose, within the guidance as well, that actually that money then goes and follows the child. The whole premise is that the money should follow the child. But I can take that away and bring in additional comments back. And also, as I said, we've had 15, 16 responses to the consultation. Last year, I think it was 12, 13, so it's similar. But I will take those on advisement and then bring that back in December.
Have you, just out of interest, have you had response from anyone in that trust that brought the legal challenge previously?
I'd have to take that away because I wouldn't have been here at the time. But I can check afterwards, Catherine.
Yeah, great.
Could I ask a question, please?
Please, Rachel, yeah.
I know previously when the clawbacks were being suggested, if schools were late in paying the clawback, interest was applied. I can't see from the regulations that there was actually any basis in order to do that. So I just wanted to ask whether that was part of the proposal going forward.
Again, I need to take that away in the sense of what was happened before, the reasons for that. And again, I can put that into the December paper. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
But it doesn't look like it's proposed in this paper.
No, it isn't proposed in this, no. But I can take back on what happened before.
No, great. So do you need a show of hands that we're happy with this and for this to go as part of that consultation? Is that the next step for this?
Raj, I take your advisement really, because I think because it's a proposal.
Yeah, a show of hands is fine as confirmation that we're happy for that consultation to go ahead. So could I see members raise your hand if you're in favour of that?
Can I just ask, I thought the consultation's already gone ahead, so I'm not clear what we're voting on. So I've already responded to the consultation.
Yeah.
So.
But won't the clawback amounts go on the full consultation that we're going to talk about later, including the high needs block, or not?
So the proposal on page 40 is that we respond in line with whether they agree the clawback proposal for 26-27, and then this will be brought back to forum in a future session. So the premise of it, do you agree with the premise of it? Then I look at the consultation and feed that back.
Yes. Yeah, does that make sense, Catherine? That there's this is my understanding of it, is that Amanda and the local authority have basically asked for I guess comments on the whole lot of it, including the policy and everything else. The specific thing that will come back to forum as my understanding of it is about that clawback policy, and that will also be on the kind of full school consultation that will include questions about that we're going to come on to later in the agenda about de-delegation and various other things. Is that correct?
Will we vote on actually accepting it when it comes back?
Correct. Yeah. So this vote is that we're happy for that policy and that clawback proposal to go to the consultation with a full suite of other questions, and then actually once we're in receipt of the consultation responses, there's then a vote on the actual substance of the proposals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. So those in favour of this going forward towards that consultation, if you just raise your hands, please.
Yeah, thank you. That's unanimous.
Great, thanks, Raj. So we'll go on again. Number 11 is also you, Amanda.
Yes, thank you. I've invited Laura to join us, as Laura has written the paper and shared in the update. So Laura, if you'd like to present on my behalf.
Yeah, no problem. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Laura Priest, and I'm the SEND Commissioner Manager for Northamptonshire. I'm just coming to tell you about the intention to undertake a procurement with service ideally being live in September 2026. So the procurement is to cover our outreach services. We currently have outreach delivered for our SEND young people through one of our schools, one of our maintained schools. The need to look at this procurement is to make sure that our services are compliant under procurement law. And it's also, a lot of the services were put in place historically and probably didn't have the most thorough commissioning done when they were put in place, I think it's fair to say. So we've recognised that over the last sort of 18 months and have been working towards developing a specification for delivering a more enhanced service. What we would like to achieve from doing a procurement is obviously compliance with procurement regulations, just to make sure we're getting good value for money, delivering really good outcomes for our children and young people, and also just making sure that we can monitor what we're paying for, making sure that the services that we deliver are really good and we're getting what we want from them. And I think, outcomes are the main aim. Children and young people outcomes are what we really want to achieve. So it's still in draft, the documentation for the service specification, but it will have around 4 different areas of outreach support. So this isn't in the paper that you've had because we've developed this since, but the specification will cover school to school outreach support. It'll also just cover children that are struggling to enter school, and also trying to support them to reintegrate once they've left school and need some support to get back into it. It will also look at the children that are at risk of permanent exclusion or children that have been permanently excluded, to support them back in either way. And we're also going to look at family outreach support as part of the service, because we recognise that we have lots of areas of good practice across the whole partnership, and this is something we can add to it and hopefully build everything in one model that we can make sure every family is accessing whatever support it is they need. So yeah, that's a very brief overview. Amanda, if there's anything else you want me to cover, please let me know.
Thank you, Laura. Thanks.
Thank you. No, nothing
Any
to add, just to
questions?
say that it's sorry to interrupt you, Chair.
No, go on, Amanda, you go.
I was just going to say thank you, Laura. It was just to identify that this process and these pieces of work are taking place. We recognise that we need to bring a paper back as well, which we will do, following on from Neil Goddard's in 2022. So that will come and that'll be more comprehensive. But no, nothing else.
Right, thanks. Paul.
Thanks, James. Laura, thanks for that. The paper makes sense. I was just querying though why we allowed the contract to go beyond its end date before looking at procuring a new one. I think I know the answer to that, but because I suspect you're having a fresh look at everything. But can you also confirm that there, from a procurement point of view, there aren't any other services that we aren't cited on that haven't that their contracts have expired and are likely to be extended in an inappropriate time, if you like, i.e. it hasn't been looked at before the end of the contract date. So it's more around this has happened. Are there any more lurking around that should have been reviewed and retendered?
Yeah, thank you. So the first part of your question, why is this one not compliant when it really should be, is due to a lack of commissioner oversight over the last, I'd say, since inception of Northampton. I think it's fair to say that commissioners weren't recruited at the time of disaggregation. I've been in post for around the last 2 years, and in the last 2 years we've done lots of work to rectify some of those things that should have been put in place that potentially weren't. So I can say with quite a lot of confidence we have oversight of everything that we should have oversight of now. We know where everything is currently in terms of its status and where we want it to be, and are working towards getting things where they need to be. So this service is one of them. So we do have waivers in place. I don't think I mentioned that when I set out, but we do have waivers in place. So they are compliant under waiver, but that is only a short-term solution. So we're working towards a longer-term solution. In terms of other contracts that potentially aren't where they need to be, we've worked really closely with our procurement colleagues to make sure that everything we are paying for is compliant in one way or another, be that via procurement or via a waiver or via an ongoing procurement exercise. So hopefully that offers a little bit of assurance that I feel we have a good a good idea of where everything is, and we've got a plan for where we want everything to be. A lot of work is being done to set out our intention for commissioning over the next 3 to 5 years. So part of that would be a 3 to 5 year plan, and that's looking at all of our contracted spend to make sure it's offering all of those things that I spoke about in the beginning of why we're doing a procurement for this particular service.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, great. Thanks. We'll move on. Item number 12, which is the high needs update, and that is over to Amanda in Troy's absence.
Thank you. So colleagues would have had the paper. It's just really an update around high needs and an explanation really of our position with some figures around high needs budget at 85.1 million with an in-year pressure of 19.4. The table really outline where we are and that sort of forecast moving forward. It's important to note that this is set against a backdrop of NNC having 5.8% of young people with an EHC. That's 5.3 nationally and 4.3 East Midlands. So we're significantly above our local stat and national neighbours, as it were. And 35% of our young people with EHCPs are currently in a specialist provision, and that's against 30% nationally. So really the paper is just an update about where we are in our finances and our numbers. And that currently, well, the data in July, we were looking at 5,121 active EHCPs. There's been some data cleansing and some closing of some EHCPs since, but also we're now in the middle of October, so there will be additional that have come through. Looking at page 84, there's an explanation really and additional information around the challenge and conditional offers from mainstream. We do have last year, and this is a piece of work that I've shared also with CEOs and head teachers, we do have a low consultation yes point at the moment. Only, last year it was sort of 12% yes at that first point, whereas nationally that's sort of 60 to 70%. We recognise that there are challenges with complexity and there are challenges with spaces, but some of the work that we've been trying to do as well with CEOs and head teachers is looking at how we can bolster and improve and support that mainstream inclusion offer. Obviously, the Ofsted scorecard, as an aside, with the proposal around that centred around inclusion may bring back some change. But there is some work that we know that we recognise that we need to do. And on the back of conversations that I've had since October, really, and since Troy submitted this, there's also some work that we're going to do moving forward around the specificity within EHCs and around the conversation around assessment and what sort of quality of information goes into that. And there will be a co-production session in December around that as an aside. That'll be coming out next week. So yes, this paper really just goes through and explains the budget pressures. In 2.4, there's some discussions around the sufficiency work that Marsha alluded to earlier. And that phase 1 is completed, and then they look for the phase 2 in spring 26. So there's lots of pieces of work that are going on alongside this. This is just sort of part of that jigsaw and part of the layer, really. And then just looking at section 3, just talking about the numbers within NNC and the pressures perhaps on the budget and the desire to support children and young people and families, but obviously the cost associated with that. And as colleagues will know, there's quite a significant, I think it's approximately 15 million that's currently assigned to independent non-maintained spaces. So again, all of this work feeds into wanting to, and what Marsha spoke about earlier about growth and sufficiency and organisation, into creating spaces where our young people don't need to travel, where our young people can have provision within their locality. And then just on towards the end of the 3.5 and 3.6, just really talking about the numbers and the desire, alluding back to that kind of connection really with the sufficiency piece around the aim to create the 800 spaces over the next sort of 7-8 years. And that what we're trying to do is more work on that forecasting, which again goes back to what Soraya was saying earlier, really. It's about having a plan. The data team have developed a really good forecasting model where actually we can start to be looking at future SEND need and future SEND capacity, going back to sort of the questions around obviously Rowan Gate earlier as well. And the need to have this information 2 or 3 years in advance as opposed to during that year, because that creates a challenge for the school that we're asking to expand, and also creates challenges around funding and census. So the aim is to be more proactive from a forecasting point of view. So just at the bottom of page 85, recommendations from the paper that Troy's presented today to Schools Forum is just really noting the increases in the requests for statutory assessment and the pressure that's putting on, I suppose, locality and on budget, and the associated budget pressures around securing good quality special educational provision and educational healthcare plans. What we really need to move to, which again is a national process as well, is that an EHCP is default mainstream and that the support is within a mainstream setting. And there's some excellent examples locally and nationally about schools and trusts that are doing that. And then to see that then those numbers of specialist provision, which are obviously smaller, are actually being used for those children that are most in need. And it's about that journey that we need to do together with trust CEOs and our maintained schools. So the next paper that will come will have more details on that. This is just to give you details and some information around the financial implications and the legal implications, and then the risks, obviously, on page 87 around the in-year deficit and the growth of that. And if the option is to do nothing, then it's only going to grow. So our options need to be to forecast, need to be to invest, so that we can invest to save model in our locality, which then ultimately does free up the funds that are currently going out of authority, out of locality, or to independent non-maintained. So it's all part of a jigsaw, but it all sort of needs to align to ultimately, over a 5-10 year plan, bring the budget down and bring the deficit down.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Catherine.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment really briefly on the reason why mainstream schools, the high percentage of them saying no to consults. I think when you look at the EHC and what they're asking you to deliver when you're in a mainstream school, and things like the child needs to be in a group of no more than 8, and things that are not feasible within a secondary school environment in particular, and definitely not feasible within the funding that they come with. There are several students that we get consults about, and we say we can meet this bit, we can't meet this bit, we can't meet this bit, we can meet this bit. If you're prepared to give us a bit more money, or you're prepared for them to come but understand that we can't meet these 2 bits, fine. But that probably still comes down as one we've said no to, even though what we're really saying is yes, but.
Yes.
And I think it's important, obviously we're going to be challenged on whether we're delivering it or not. So it's really important that we do say yes, but, and we're clear the bits we can't meet. But I don't think it's necessarily certainly from us anyway, not a blanket no to everybody. We're trying to be as inclusive as we can, but you will have read some of the plans and the crazy things that we just can't deliver with our settings. So
yeah, and I think it's certainly is a recognition we do understand, and having been in your seat, as it were, I do recognise the challenges of receiving a lot of consultations as well, but I also recognise as well that part of the pieces of work we're doing around the quality of EHCs and the quality of the language within those and the guidance, I think it is a really important piece of work, because there are more children that can be supported at mainstream settings. So I think that workshop and that engagement piece that we're going to do at the end of this term and the beginning of spring, I really invite you to be part of that, so that we can really shape something for the future that enables more young people to be in a mainstream setting, and to be part of their locality and part of their peers, so that we can then utilise the funding differently. So please do come along. I really appreciate that.
Thanks. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, James. I just really wanted to kind of take us back to December 24, because at that meeting we had quite a long presentation from the previous interim for the council, Charisse, in regard to a presentation around the plan for this. And I just wondered what's the view, because I wondered why we aren't kind of reporting against that plan in this piece. I was just confused because it was quite a clear plan of what we're doing and how we're moving towards. Or am I reading that incorrectly, that will come at a different point?
Was that the strand work around the SEND improvement and the SEND transformation plan?
That's right.
I wasn't at that meeting, so I'm just, is that the one you mean?
Yes, the locality model and the strand, that is exactly it.
Yeah. So I think that there was very much a direction of travel around the locality model. There's been obviously a little bit of a pause and a redirection with the changes of leadership and structure, and at the moment there is a significant piece of work that's being supported through the current team around structure support in that locality model, because the SEND team have moved to a locality space. So they now have 4 separate settings, and we now have 55 permanent staff, which we didn't have before. And I think that locality model from a SEND point of view has been really positive, and the EHC teams are split that way. That's been a real positive. The other work has not stopped, but it has just been slower. So I'm sure Cornelia will come in a moment around that. So there is very much a conversation within around locality. We recognise that works from an early help and an early identification point of view. It feeds in with the work we're doing around hubs, and it feeds in with the work we're doing around family hub and early support. There's quite a lot of strands of action that are in transit within the local authority that will come to sort of fruition at the end of this year. As an academic year, they've just taken a little bit of a longer process, and there's had to be a little bit of a reset.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. A good opportunity for Cornelia there to talk about it.
Sorry to intervene. I really wanted today just to listen, and it's great to see, how people work collectively, in a transparent and open way towards solutions for our challenges locally. Just to obviously add to what Amanda has said, and I don't want to repeat, but there's been indeed changes, as you'd appreciate, that have slow down the improvement work, but that has continued nevertheless, and we do obviously progress in terms of SEND, and it will be really helpful actually to look at how we could look into some of those reports in terms of impact and where we are to date, and then to see how School Forum maybe could actually influence some of those decisions going forward. And how we could engage more broadly with our schools, because especially in light of the white paper that is coming out shortly, and just to see how that will shape maybe our direction of travel. But that work is continuing, and we also have progressed family help strategy. Again, would be really happy to schedule that into one of the future meetings, looking at how that could also influence our collective ambition, to improve outcomes. It's very much, that locality support, and looking at varied levels of tier levels of support for children and families, making sure that we absolutely provide that early support, early intervention in varied ways to children and to schools. We all know, obviously, that if we intervene early, we help children to thrive, and potentially prevent needs from escalating. So all that work is happening in the background. It's probably not as focused and crystallized as we would like, and we do at the moment obviously reviews and put together, as I said, those strategies and plans, and would welcome the opportunity actually to engage in further conversations, because I think that we need to do it together. And yeah, so happy to schedule as the strategy is being finalized, to schedule into a future meeting and see how we could contribute to that collectively. It would be really helpful. but building on the previous work, just to be assured, that hasn't disappeared just because of the changes. It has evolved and is being shaped going forward, and would welcome your input into that.
Yeah, thanks, Cornelia. And I know, that there's on behalf of Forum, and I'm sure for kind of everybody's trust maintain schools, everybody would be really keen to work with you on that, because I think, there's probably a fair amount of enthusiasm for that locality model, and it is reassuring to hear you say, I guess, I won't pretend to speak for anyone other than myself, is that it's really important for us that the kind of strategy endures even if personnel changes occur, because I think that's what schools, children and family really need, is that sense of surety that we want something to buy into, and kind of make sure that even if personnel change and leaders, that happens, but actually the strategy is the strategy, and regardless of who's there, that's what we really want to see delivered and work in partnership with you on.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to stop and start. That's not good for anyone, is it? It is about continuity, even though it may at times not progress at the pace that we would like, but that focus is really important. And I've been very conscious of that. When I started in my position, I don't want to start again. Absolutely not. It's about building on what we've had there, because there is some good stuff, and some good work, and it's just obviously taking this into the next phase. And as I said, I would welcome your input into that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thanks. That's really good to hear. Thanks. We'll move on to the next item. I'm going to slightly change the agenda here on request from professional associations. We're entering into a suite of items that are really about kind of those that will go on to the consultation. And it's probably Raj to advise me here, is that we will need a kind of show of hands on these, but it's a show of hands not to approve the actual policy, but to approve the proposals that are going to go on to that consultation. So similarly to the permanent exclusion item that we had, what we're approving is what goes on to the consultation. We're not approving the actual outcome. The purpose is to then wait and see what the consultation responses are, then have a debate, and then vote on actually the substance of it. I just want to check with Raj that I've got that right.
Yeah, I believe that's correct, James. This will be a vote for the consultation, and then it'll come back at a later date for final approval.
Great. So this is actually item number 16, which is about the de-delegation of for trade union facilities time. And I think Amanda's going to present that. And then we have got a couple of representatives from professional associations. And I would open up to comments from them if they would like to put anything forward. So Amanda, over to you first of all.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just to reiterate that, it's literally to keep you cited as we're going on a journey together, in a sense, a proposal, a consultation, and then a response sort of December time. And if, as happened last year, there was a discussion in December, and then again in sort of the January-Feb meeting, wasn't there? So yes, it's just really to share with you where we are. So item 16, I've moved along. So now we're just talking about trade union facilities for maintained schools. So this is about obviously trade union time, facilities time. So it's a paper that comes every year and around the de-delegation. So it's just really sharing the proposal and the recognition agreement with the trade unions, talking about the facility time and the legal context around that. Last year, or this current year rather, the agreement was for £4 per pupil. And then that was then approved later and ratified, I believe, in the February. It was discussed in December, then brought again in the February meeting. So the proposal really just talks about the benefits of that, the de-delegation, the pooled arrangement, what colleagues may receive, etc. And then there's obviously 6.1 is a comment around academies, which we have a separate meeting around it in November with trade unions about, and the aim is to bring that for the 26-27 financial year. So the recommendations for Forum really on 182 are recommended to vote to pull their facility arrangements in 26-27 for maintained schools falling within NNC. for school members to vote for the pupil rate, which is in line with teacher increases, that 4%. So we're looking at a set of, and it sort of equates to sort of the 2.5 teacher days and the 1.5 non-teacher day. The two proposals for consideration are to, which we will go through, as you mentioned, to out with the main consultation, which will have all various bits in there to consult on. So two proposals: retain the current level of pupil funding of £4 per pupil, or to increase in line with the teacher pay settlement of 4% and increase to 4.16. And then the financial implications without that, and then the legal implications. So the paper just really is sharing with you the proposal to put that forward, and that will then go in the consultation wider survey that's sent out by Finance later.
Thanks, Amanda. Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I've got a number of things to comment on. Firstly, is that this is the first year that the unions haven't been consulted with about that cost per pupil rate. Usually, in the old county council and even since unitary, unions have been invited to discuss what that pupil rate was, and all of a sudden we see it in the papers for the meeting. So we do want it noted that we haven't seen that, and we don't know what those options mean for the facility time, whether the reduced option, whether the option one is to keep things the same, increase facility time, decrease it. We haven't had those conversations yet, so we don't feel it's a fair consultation because we don't know where we stand. You mentioned, Amanda, the proposal for inviting academies to pay into the de-delegation fund. Again, we've not been updated with where we are on that. I am a little bit confused in the consultation paper where it says the local authority will support and facilitate this, but will not be party to the arrangements. Now, I don't know what that means. Can you explain that a bit more?
So yeah, the 2 points. The first bit, unfortunately, as you know, the JCNF didn't take place earlier in the year and has now been moved to November. So this is simply a proposal. Nothing's gone through. It isn't a finalised consultation. That will go into the paper later. But this will be discussed in the November meeting that we have. It's quite early on. I think it's the 3rd or the 4th of November. But I take on board your point. There hasn't been an opportunity before. The part about 6.1 obviously is a separate entity. Those conversations have been taking place, and although they have started, that again will also be discussed in the November meeting. As you know, there's an assurance from Adele that we will support that and we will provide an opportunity and an option for that. So it is something that the council is absolutely committed to doing and offering that. So that again will be discussed HR more widely in that November meeting.
Thank you. I mean, I note that, Amanda. We didn't want the meeting in November. We wanted it a lot earlier, and unfortunately, we've not been able to achieve that. I suppose, from my point of view, it's ensuring that unions can't do individual SLAs with schools. Is what I need the assurance is. It's the local authority that does that.
No, we will. Yeah, when we meet, we have a proposal to
Okay.
discuss with you that does cover that.
Thank you.
I wanted to assure you of that.
If I can further, James, in terms of the consultation, means I'm aware that Marie Lally has academised. It will be useful to know the reps that are consulting with the head teachers from the maintained school, and I would certainly ask whether we could have an audience with them, either with those reps or directly with the head teachers via Zoom or something, because there are a few points that we want to make, and actually I do welcome the points that our academies made earlier on in the meeting about maintained schools and their budgets, and if they are managed individually, particularly when looking at HR issues and HR providers. I think the academies are right. I think there is some money to be saved for maintained schools to pool their HR resources. It's something that the unions have been asking for ever since the LGSS services from the local authority stopped. our experience is that HR providers services are variable to maintain schools, and it is the HR providers' responsibility to consult with unions on changes of policy, and they are not represented on the NNC policy subgroup. So whilst as NCC has core policies that are related to schools, schools can adopt their own policies with their HR company without us knowing, and the risk of that is North Northampton Council don't know those policy changes either, and I think that is a high risk strategy for the local authority. I think the rest of the paper and the impact assessment is really useful. We just need our assurances that with the 4% potential pay increase, that then either we want to know whether that maintains our facility time or increases it, or whether the loan and offer decreases our facility time. Thank you. I'll give way to Amanda.
Yeah, no, I'll come back on the latter point. But I think it'd be really useful to add the discussion around HR to our meeting in November, so that we because we'll have HR representatives there, so I can take that away and feed that back to Katie.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. In terms of forum membership, so Catherine Murphy is the maintained secondary school, so Latimer is the only maintained secondary school.
I get that.
And you're correct, Earls Barton have academised. So I think I'm going to go around my screen and hope I'm not missing anybody. So Rachel Gibbs is from maintained primary, and I think Angela is also a member for the maintained sector. Is there anyone else I've missed there, Raj?
So my question is there, James, how will they consult with the wider heads of the local authority, and can we have an audience with them as part of the consultation? Well,
the thing about an audience with the rep, I mean, I don't know the answer to that, Richard, is the honest answer to that. I'm not aware that has ever been done previously. The consultation normally with the other heads takes the form of actually the consultation that the local authority do, because of course the reps will see the responses to that consultation, because of course it's sent out to absolutely every school and every head. So in terms of how do they gather the views of other maintained heads, schools and leaders, it's through the local authority's consultation. Now, one of the things that we have been concerned about is what's the response rate to that. I think that is a kind of, an important question to ask. And obviously anything the local authority can do to improve the response rate would be very much appreciated. But that is the mechanism for them to learn of their colleagues' views on what has been proposed. I'm probably needing Raj's advice or Amanda's advice as to whether or not it's appropriate to meet with school forums reps outside of this forum, because I don't know the answer to that, but it's not something I've been familiar with happening previously. I don't know if Amanda, if you want to come in on that before I go to Paul.
Yeah, I would just sort of suggest I'm more than happy to facilitate a session where it's an open invite to maintained settings, and then we can have a conversation that way, and that could just be a virtual session, because Catherine obviously chairs a secondary heads forum, but she'll be the only maintained on that space, and then we have a primary head forum, but that's a mixture of academies and maintained. So it might be, Richard, that it's an option to actually set up a separate session with union representation and those maintained heads that can attend, wish to attend, etc. But at least there's been that avenue for conversation.
That would be really great, actually. Things are busy, aren't they? And I just didn't want. I just wouldn't want the message to get diluted, really. That's no reflection on the representation reps that will go and do it. But like the conversation we've had about HR provision and stuff, the unions, we get to see the impact that it has on the ground floor. We get to see the absences. We get to see the the mistakes staff make, the disciplinaries, the safeguarding, and that all impacts on the effectiveness of the school. And so all I'm saying, I'm not sure that part of the picture is explained.
Yeah, I think that's a great solution, Amanda. I think, yeah, if you were to arrange an open invite to maintained heads, I think that's the perfect solution there. Paul.
Thanks, James. Notwithstanding the points that I think Richard's just made about having an opportunity to be cited on the proposals that are going out, when I was looking at the paper, I was just looking at we're consulting on the questions we're consulting on currently are retaining the de-delegation level at the current rate, the £4 rate, or increasing it by 4%. My concern is with just those two options, and I know you can't have unlimited options, is that with the pressure that schools are under, they may well just reflect the one that gives them the least pain at the moment. What I was wondering is, we don't know, obviously, yet what the settlement is going to be for the national funding formula next year, and unfortunately, it won't come in time for this consultation, or unlikely to come in time for the consultation. But I'm wondering whether there's a benefit here of adding a third option in that basically says, would the maintained member support an increase in line with the increase in whatever increase in funding comes along? So this year, obviously, there wasn't income coming in to a 4% level to pay for the teachers' pay rise. Schools are expected to find a degree of that. I think our average, again, finance colleagues can correct me, but our average increase in funding once it had been consolidated in was around about 2%. But I'm concerned that if, as it stands, it might well push the consultation more towards, well, we don't want it to go up at all, rather than something that will almost certainly fall below what is likely to be a settlement coming through. And I wouldn't want, I'd want to see an option where the members, maintained heads, could give their view on that. And the reason I'm saying that is because, as we know, when it comes to decisions after the consultation, our next meeting, we can only go by the information that's given there. So if we don't consult on it, we don't have an option to come up with a third way. It's either whatever, we can either choose to accept or not accept the consultation, but we can't come up with a different solution, a compromise solution at that meeting if we don't consult on it now. If
I can respond to that, James.
Yeah, please do.
I totally welcome that, Paul, and you're right. And that's why we wanted to be consultated with, to look at what the options. We didn't have a choice of what the options were before it came to this meeting, and we wanted that, and we wanted the school forum's opinion for that. As we stand today, the phones keep ringing. We keep supporting members in schools in a timely manner with the maintained schools, and actually, one of the purposes of consultating with the wider maintained head teachers is that, firstly, we recognise the falling role in schools, particularly primary schools. We recognise there's a budget implication with that, and we recognise that their costs are either standing still or increasing. Okay, now that has an impact on staff. Teachers are covering more than one class. Support staff are covering classes that they shouldn't be, because Hilters are covering more lessons than they should do as per their contract. This results in staff making mistakes, safeguarding issues, and it also results in staff going off sick, which actually costs the school more money than an option 3 would be of an increased option. And this is the kind of information we need to impart to head teachers. I totally get what you say. The the thing is, what's out of our control is what the pay award is going to be. So the pay award could be 2%, it could be 4%, it could be 10%. None of us know what that is going to be, particularly for support staff. So I welcome the discussion. I'd welcome one or two more options being discussed on the table for the consultation. But again, I think that is the specific reason why we needed to be part of the consultation before the options came to this meeting.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the other thing I was going to say about the options is, of course, actually, when it comes to the consultation, there is a further thing, which is, you know, I guess the hinge question, because there will be something, I'm assuming, from officers that says, do you continue to support the de-delegation of funds for trade union facilities time? Because that in and of itself is a vote. And then if you do support that, at what level that should be paid? That's how we've done that consultation.
Yeah, that's right. And that should be the first question, but they need to know the impact on them if they do not support 100%. The de-delegated budget. So they need to know the impact 100%. Of that.
Yeah, that is right. And then, I mean, you know, but if there was Amanda, you have to tell me the view of officers. If there was a third option that said to, you know, increase the current rate in line with the, I guess we'd call it the National Funding Formula settlement or something along that nature, you'd have to think about how you word that. There's a yes, no, and then there's the three options.
Yeah, I'm more than more than happy to take that away and have that discussion and add a third option. But it's also important to know historically there's only been two options. So in all the papers that we've had since disaggregation, it's been continue to stay or increase by X. So I've simply followed that model, but I do understand that things can evolve and understand the pressures on schools. So I think that that's a valid discussion. And again, as I say, quite happy to facilitate sessions that haven't happened before, because historically, obviously, you wouldn't have had those conversations either. So happy to set up an open forum for head teachers with unions, and happy to add these points to the JCNF that we have in November as well. And yeah, more than happy to look at a third option, because I understand that, again, there are financial pressures. But we'll just be really mindful with finance and with Soraya and Yoki that we're just conscious of that wording. So there's that clarity around it, because you're right, Paul, that ideally you'd want the National Funding Formula next month. So it's all sorted, or now really, so that you can do that work on it. And when it's later and later, you're right, you're consulting on an I don't know or a best case, which creates pressures, doesn't it, for local authorities, because we need to set a budget. We want to get things in place. But I'm quite happy to take that away and work with colleagues and bring that update back in December.
Thanks. And maybe if we approve that option 3, that also, Richard, gives you and professional associations the chance to work with Amanda and the local authority on something, because obviously what I'm slightly wary of is us not taking a decision now, because I don't know where.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah.
To say. So perhaps if that option 3's something that then forum supports, then that does give you the chance to undertake that work with them. And then, you know, obviously that can go in the paper, can't it? To say, well, actually, the professional associations preferred is this, because I think, you know, that's valuable for school leaders to know as well.
Before I give way to my other union colleagues, it's important that we know how each option impacts on facility time. You know, we're taking calls from members in the evenings after work. We you know, officers are doing a lot of work that perhaps the head teachers don't and the forum doesn't see. So can anybody ask the question what impact the facility time has on regarding option 1, option 2, or potentially of option 3?
So as I said, if I can take that away, I could bring that back to our discussions in November.
Okay.
It gives me the option to take that away.
Okay.
Instead of saying something now that might be.
Yeah. If we agree in principle that those, you know, because essentially it's the questions that are for consideration for the consultation, you could then work with Amanda on what is the supporting information that goes out with the consultation. And I think you're right, Richard. It would be helpful in that to say, well, actually, you know, if you go for option 1, it means X. If you go for option 2, it means this. And if you go for option 3, it means Z. You know, you've got a clarity of that.
And I think heads would welcome that. They would welcome that clarity. And I think then that information could also be used then for the academy bit that we're doing as well. because it gives them real clarity. It's the same piece of work for two entities.
Thank you for the
Thank
discussion. I'll give way to my other colleagues if they want to comment.
Is there anything else, anything further there? Okay, what I'll do is I'm hoping Raj can still hear me and is still there, because I think because this only affects maintained members, it's a vote for maintained members only.
Yes,
in
it's
terms
just
of what
maintained.
goes on there. Is that right, Raj?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
perfect.
We normally do it separately between maintain primary and maintain secondary.
Yeah, and again, I'll just stress again that this is not a decision about actually what happens. It's a decision about those options. So what we're going to what we're seeking approval for is what goes on the consultation is the two options that are there on page 183, plus a third option about the rate increasing in line with the national funding formula, although wording of that to be agreed with professional associations and NNC. And of course, the bit before that is a question about agreed to support. There's the yes or no, and then at what levels. So if we go for maintained primary first, if you just have a show of hands.
Sorry, James, I'm not sure we can vote on it until we've had that consultation in November with the unions on what the options are.
But Richard, but it's a vote to consult. Otherwise, we're not going to approve it going to a consultation. It's not to say which of those options it should be, because I don't know where that would leave us if we didn't vote on that, because that means then it's not going to go out as part of the. It's not going to go as a consultation.
Okay.
And I think it's important to note that this information won't go out until we have the wider information on funding anyway. So the meeting in November will take place before this anyway, and that information can be fed then into the update and fed into the consultation. Nothing's going to happen between now and the 4th of November because we're not going to have any funding information.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because what I'm wary of is unless we do that, and that's the point about actually what we are going to include is that third option, which is to be agreed between NNC and yourselves. Is otherwise the risk is there is no mandate then to even send that out as a consultation. I don't know where that would leave us. Are you happy with that, Richard, on that basis? Sorry, Rochelle, I can see your hand up there.
I tend to agree with my colleague, Richard, in the fact of that unless people know what that actually means, how can they vote for it?
But nothing will go out.
I wonder if we're talking at cross purposes here. So we're not voting on the actual substance of the proposals. We're voting to put those proposals to the maintained head teachers. So one of those proposals is a TBC proposal that you will agree with Amanda. Forum's role for this is not to say it's option 1, 2, or 3, or even a yes or no. It's for us to say we're happy for leaders to be consulted on those proposals.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Obviously, what happens afterwards, and I know
it's clearer, James. Yes. Than what it was. But what I will say is that, you know, if we'd have been consulted beforehand, we probably wouldn't be having to have this conversation now. And I think it's something to just bear in mind for the future, that for the future, we don't want this really to occur again.
Yeah, no, understood. Yeah, I understand. I mean, that's obviously something for professional associations and NNC to work out in terms of timing of those meetings.
Well, if we'd have had the opportunity, and we did, you know, say we wanted this to be done before this meeting, but the meeting was cancelled.
Yeah, understood. You know, I can understand your frustration about that, but that's, I suppose I'm saying that's not really within mine or Forum's gift.
No, you're quite correct. But it doesn't stop the fact of that. This is why we're almost behind the curveball now in terms of what's going on.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I would be keen for us to reach some agreement on that, because my worry is we'd be even further behind, because I think the timings of forum would mean that it would then be difficult for us to approve the consultation at the next meeting. And that's where I need to take advice from officers, because I don't know what that would mean. Because if we didn't vote to include that on the consultation, it would mean the local authority couldn't include it at all. So my guess is the chances of it happening would be further diminished rather than enhanced. But I appreciate the feedback on how that process has been. But as I say, I will be really, really clear. This is forum voting on what is put to head teachers in a consultation, not voting on any of those options themselves. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity of the debate. In terms of taking the vote on the consultation, yes, that's great. I think before it goes to the December meeting, we would need to have had that consultation with heads and the impact on facility time. We need to know what the impact of facility time is on option 1, 2, and 3. So thank you, James.
Yeah, no, understood. And it's a vote about, as I say, that option 3 is to be decided between yourselves and the local authority. But what we're basically giving approval for is the options 1, 2, and 3 to go on the paper, not actually the substance of them. So on that basis, for maintained primary members, if you are in favour of the options 1 and 2 listed on 183 and a to be confirmed option 3 as discussed between professional associations and NNC, please can you just raise your hand if you're in support of that?
Yeah, thank you. That's unanimous.
Yeah, thanks. And for secondary maintained, if you're in support of those options going to the consultation.
As that's only me, is it possible that the primary and the secondary can be slightly that they could look different? Because my view has always been I should be paying for what I'm getting rather than just paying on the off chance, given that it's not something we actually ever benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a similar thing, Catherine, to that discussion. It's whether or not, and I know it's a hard position because you are the only maintained school. I mean, it's whether or not you actually want that to go on the consultation, and then you can complete that, and then you would vote on that.
Well, currently, I'm going to abstain because I'm not going to pay
Here we go
for
again.
service that I don't get. So if you want to change it so that we have an SLA, so that we pay for the services we receive, that's fine. If not, the consultation can go out as it is.
I mean, it's up to you in terms of how you vote for that, because you are in a very unusual position. Whereas for you is that you can abstain from this vote, and then that therefore means that the local authority would then choose what they put on the consultation, because they wouldn't have a mandate either way, I think.
I think it was made clear last year, if I'm butting in, James, I'm sorry. It was made clear last year, and we all went back to the legal document from the DFE. It was clear it was a split vote. It was a split vote between secondary school and primary school.
Yeah.
We didn't like it at the time, but we had to suck it up. We had to accept it. And I think that still stands.
Yeah, and that is absolutely correct. You could have one arrangement for the primary maintained schools and a completely different arrangement, or no arrangement for the maintained secondary school. They're not contingent on one another. So I just want to come back to the vote there on that, Catherine. So are you abstaining from that vote about what should go on the consultation? Yeah.
I will do whatever it makes things easier for the consultation to happen. I just needed to point out that my position hasn't changed from last time. I don't know if anybody else with their hand up can advise what's most useful.
Yeah, I'll let I've got Richard, then Rochelle, and then Amanda, and if we do it in that order, and then I think we will need to get to a kind of decision on that Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, thanks, James. I just thought it was useful, hopefully, to challenge politely Catherine's view regarding not or paying for something that you don't get. I think, and this is why I think Richard's proposal of having some sort of meeting with heads, maintained heads, would be very useful, because I think the system regarding trade union facilities time has been in place for over 30 years, and often the low level work that is done stops things escalating. So we do lots of informal work behind the scenes with members across NNC, and prior to that, the whole, when it was a county council, and that's a given. And I think I just want to put the alternative view. There is industrial relations are based on having enough time to support lay officers, of which I am one of the many within our area of Northants. And if that is undermined, then we can't do that low level work, which often doesn't get reported. It's a bit like tip of the iceberg. The stuff that comes to the attention of most schools is the very tip of the iceberg. The bulk of the iceberg, most schools and most leaders don't tend to see that firsthand, because that is all dealt with informally to try to reduce things from escalating. And I think we just need to have that balanced view that, and sadly that view does exist, and I understand that, why should we pay trade union facilities time when there are full-time officers? Well, the bulk of the casework is done by, certainly for the NASUWT, is done by lay officers, about 90%. So, if that is the tip of the that is the bulk of the iceberg under sea level.
I totally appreciate that, and morally you're absolutely right, but I'm running a business here with a very, very limited budget and lots of things. So if you're not doing anything to support the staff at Latimer, my argument is that I shouldn't be contributing financially.
Well, we can't say whether we are or not, because a lot of it is confidential and low level. So, it's all part of industrial relations, not just, and I appreciate, you have got a school to run, and I get that, and a budget to kind of stick to. But if you look at the proportion of the budget that trade union facilities time takes up, it's way less than 0.2% of most school budgets. It's a drop in the ocean. Although I do appreciate that there's pressure on budgets. With a recent trust, when we're trying to negotiate some facilities time with that trust, it worked out to 0.02%. So that's two 1/100ths of 1%. So in the scheme of things, we're looking at a very small proportion of the budget.
Yeah,
thank you,
Richard. I do appreciate it, and it's difficult. I don't want to curtail the conversation, but I also think it's with the secondary maintained sector in NNC, it's really difficult because there's a single secondary maintained school, and actually, obviously, all de-delegation arrangements. You're right. There's a kind of proud history of that, but the kind of idea is that it was, it's a collective de-delegation to serve a collective interest. And I think one of the difficulties is we've got one maintained school in NNC, and what I'm slightly wary of is I don't want it, either for yourselves or for Catherine and Latimer to feel that actually we're sort of almost having a proxy debate at Forum regarding what Latimer should or shouldn't do, which isn't really for the wider membership of Forum in any event. And obviously as that sole maintained secondary, it has to be right that the representation on Forum votes whichever way they see fit. Rochelle, then Amanda, and as I say, I'm mindful of time.
Thank you, James. I won't say anything more because my colleague has covered it from what he's just said, and I agree with what you've just said in terms of sorry, I heard somebody speaking then. What you've just commented on, so I won't take up any more time.
Thanks, Rochelle. And Amanda.
Yeah, so just to conclude, I think this isn't a discussion from our point of view that we don't value the offer, which, as I say, Adele's made a very sincere commitment to ensure that it happens from an academy point of view. This is around sort of a maintained space, and I'm more than happy to facilitate a session and arrange that. So there is that opportunity. I can only apologise that the meeting didn't happen beforehand, but it will happen before this needs to be brought back again. So there is that time, and the meeting will happen before the consultation papers come out from finance anyway. So nothing is set in stone. It's just literally a discussion around an agreement to consult. What that consultation ends up looking like will be our discussion in November, and then that can be brought back. This just gives us a bit of flexibility by adding in a different option, which historically I've looked back for the papers over the last 4 years, there's never been a third option. So I think that's a really good way of evolving and understanding that schools are changing. I'm more than happy as well to take Richard's suggestion as well as adding in a bit of detail around what each option will mean. More than happy to add that to the paper moving forward, because again, that's what hopefully that we can do in that November session. So just wanted to reiterate that we're here to work with you, really want to support that and provide that opportunity, because I welcome obviously that there is a real valuable resource as well in what you're doing and the support that you're offering. So just wanted to sort of clarify that really as a last point.
Great, thanks Amanda. Catherine.
James, on that basis then, if I vote that the consultation can go ahead.
Great, thank you. So yeah. So if you've got that, right, so that's in favour of it being consulted upon.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, and thanks to Professional Association colleagues for joining us on that one. That's great. So we're going to flip back to, it's now item 13. And again, this is a similar position. It's the school's balance control policy. And again, it's to approve this policy's inclusion on the consultation document. And I think Catherine's just going to talk about this briefly.
Yes, so thank you, Chair. So in July Schools Forum, I presented a paper regarding the 24-25 maintained school balances and their licence deficits. And within that paper, it outlined the next steps, include seeking Schools Forum approval for the school balance control policy for the 26-27 financial year. So just to highlight, the number of schools that committed some revenue balance in excess of the 10% decreased from 14 to 12 at the end of 24-25. And as the monitoring paper highlighted earlier, there's every indication the overall balances, carry forward balances, are decreasing as well. So just highlighted what our current policy is, not suggesting any changes to that policy. So really I'm looking for Schools Forum to approve that policy be included in the next consultation.
Right, thanks. And just to note, that's it's a slightly different wording, I think, than there's on page 94. It's not for us to approve the policy, it's to approve the policy's inclusion on the consultation paper. And is this just again for maintained members to vote on?
That would be my assumption, seeing as we're talking about only the, how we can control the maintained schools balances.
Agreed. Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. That's my understanding as well. So for maintained members only, I don't think there is a need to split this into primary and secondary maintained. But those in favour of the school balances control policy being on the consultation paper as is, if you could raise your hand, please.
Thank you. That's unanimous again.
Thanks very much. Great. Thanks, Catherine. And item 14 is the proposed transfer from the schools block to high needs. And again, obviously, this is the proposal, and what we will vote on is for this to go on the consultation rather than a decision about what will happen or what forum recommends should happen. So this is over to you, Amanda.
Thank you. Mindful of time, so I'm assuming that everyone's read the paper. So just this is a paper that has been brought before. So the purpose is obviously just a decision in principle whether to transfer 0.5 or more from the school needs block, from the schools block, to the high needs block. And the consultation, as noted, will follow through. Section 2 talks about previous blocks and the use of the funding up until now. And Page 106 talks about the recommendations to note the increasing pressures. As I've noted before, we were aware that North Hants is significantly higher than regional neighbours as well as national in the sense of EHCs and flux. To note the recommendation to note the work being undertaken by officers to develop a proposal, which what Soraya was alluding to earlier in the work around TFP, to agree in principle a transfer of 0.5% from SB to the high needs block, and to note that 3.4 that if schools forum wish to transfer more, this could be considered for future years after 26-27. So next steps, just to clarify for those on the call, a consultation regarding this proposed transfer will be sent to schools inviting their feedback. This consultation will be distributed through the head teacher's newsletter and direct emails to schools and CEOs, and NNC encourages schools to participate and have their input into that. Risks associated are obviously the high needs pressures continue to mount. We continue to have a significant growth in our EHCs, especially in the 0 to 5 space. There's a significant growth within that. And we need to incent our invest save model so that we can ultimately provide a greater offer for our mainstream inclusion space. So the request is to agree consultation, the proposal to go to a consultation for 0.5%.
Thanks, Amanda. Paul, I'll come over to you.
Lovely, thanks, James. I'm interested in the way that we consult on this now, and the questions, specifically the questions that we put in the consultation. The reason I'm saying this is, in the past, Forum has always supported a transfer, but it's made a difference. You know, it's either got us close to balancing the budget or given us a good chance. As we can see from the numbers here, that we're way beyond that. Moving the money just simply is it's not solving the problem, and it is creating a problem for schools. You know, I would argue that perhaps schools would have been better able to keep children and be able to support children with additional needs, with higher needs in the mainstream setting, and not needing to access other high needs funding had they not had the money over the last few years top sliced from them. So, but we were doing that, and Forum have always supported that in the basis of trying to balance the budgets across the blocks. So when it comes to the consultation, I think it would be useful to specify in the consultation the question of whether schools would like to agree for 0.5% of their funding to be essentially taken top slice to support the deficit in the high needs block funding, or would they prefer to keep the funding within their own school to support children with higher needs in their school setting? Because to me, that's what we're now being asked. And again, with the education white paper coming out and an absolutely vital need to keep inclusion, and inclusion being at the heart of how we're moving forward, I think giving schools the best opportunity for them to be able to offer those inclusive provisions and give that support is mostly done without taking out a top slice that probably inhibits them to start with. But that's the kind of wording, I think, and the way I would like to see us putting it to consultation. I don't know what others' comments
are. Catherine.
I think you're absolutely spot on there, Paul. I also think it might result in less admin and less people's time as a school filling in a form to apply for some higher needs funding, somebody at the other end assessing whether it's, all of that to essentially get money back that we, if that stays in the school, that's exactly where I'm spending it. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there, of actually how's it going to have an impact on the kids? And the best way for it to have an impact on the kids is if the school has it and we don't give it to somewhere to then apply for it and get it back. So I would welcome that as an option.
Andrew.
As always, this decision is the hardest one, I think, isn't it, for forums? And for years, we've been doing this really in an increasing space of having a deficit of evidence upon which to make an informed decision. And I don't mean that as a criticism of any, I totally agree with what's just been said. The risk is, of course, that the answer to that question, and it's not dissimilar to the debate I think we've just had, is surrounds the fact that schools are no longer answering what do they perceive the best value to be. They're also answering the question, regardless of what they perceive the value to be, their cash flow can't afford it. And I think those are becoming two separate questions. In other words, schools might well say about facilities time, not reopening that debate, we really want this. The fact is, I don't have the cash to pay for it. And I fear that we're in the same domain with this now. And I think that is very similar to many of the conundrums that schools are now facing, and it's the dial that's turned even a little bit further of school poverty. So I think you're right, we do need to make that an offer, but of course we do have to wonder what will be the outcome if 95 or 55%, or how do you handle that, Paul, as an answer? If 55% of schools say we would prefer to retain this money, what then? Do we reduce the amount by that proportional, and then or in actual fact, will that be terminal for the entire system? And that's what worries me about us making an evidence-informed decision. So whilst I agree with what's just been said, I just wonder whether this is the last year that we can make these kinds of decisions without having a much more detailed evidential approach that goes to heads, that goes to ourselves, that goes to others, so we can understand the impact on the whole of a decision which we make about our own school. Whereas I think the funding situation is driving people quite naturally to just say, yes, but in my school, I'm trying to decide on the least unaffordable thing to do. And I think that inevitably and understandably is skewing a lot of decision making. I think it's the same reason why a lot of conference CPD providers at the moment describe attendance at courses as being very low in areas which you might describe as critically important. It's not because people don't value them, it's because they simply don't have the cash flow to pay for them. So it's just how do we apply some caution, because we've got to be careful what we end up with. It's got to lead to an immediate solution this year. I've never understood how, as a schools forum, we can any longer approve a budget which is ostensibly and obviously unaffordable, because we're in massive deficit. And you know, we can't. We're in a very unusual situation, are we not? Because in any other area of spending, you just simply wouldn't approve the budget.
No, agreed. I think you're absolutely right, Andrew. I mean, I'd be really keen to hear what you think about that, Amanda, because you know, I guess the fundamental question is for NNC is we're asking schools to approve that transfer of you know that they will feel it's 0.5%, but they will feel it, and the purpose of that is to make an absolutely horrific deficit still an absolutely horrific deficit, but just slightly less horrific. And it's whether or not you feel actually it is worth doing that, or whether or not there is a way of saying to schools, do you know what, that this is the position we're in. We would you know, I don't know. I just would be interested to hear what you feel about that as a council.
Yeah. And I do recognise all of that. I've equally been, you know, on the other side and had a budget to balance. So I do understand the pressures of that and of all of these conversations about money. But I think we're also in a space where we're already giving schools additional anyway that are above that 0.5%. You know, you've got the school inclusion funding, you've got early help inclusion funding, you've got the new COSI panel, which has funding around that as well for Section 19, or to try and prevent exclusion. So I think as a council, we're putting in extra things to prevent exclusion, with care panels. So we are funding more and trying to be clever with our money in a different way. I think we just are in a space where since the disaggregation, there's been a deficit anyway. So I think it is a challenging space. But I think if we do nothing, it isn't going to help young people. I recognise that what you were saying, Andrew, about the possibility of looking at next year what an option could be and how we could do something differently. But I'd just be concerned about schools, I think, and I recognise Catherine's points as well, the concern around not having an additional amount of money and how that might impact schools and how that might impact, because I think there are so many changes that are potentially coming through that are going to be asking schools to be more inclusive, and they're going to be assessed that way. And we are working in a space at the moment where it is a default no. So there's lots of anomalies, I think, in this space. But I also recognise that 0.5 isn't going to fix the deficit either. So I do understand that the quandary around it and the anomaly. But the ask is around, there is increasing pressure. The ask is that there are increasing EHCs, so that needs to be funded and needs to be supported while we wait to see what a SEM paper might look like, while we wait to see what happens with the override. All of these are unknowns. And as a local authority, we're trying our best to deliver a SEN service in a space with very limited funds. So that might not answer your question, but just sort of trying to give
it does. And I think we all appreciate the local authorities in a difficult position.
Yeah, for sure.
I think everybody, we understand that. It's not as though it's just happening in NNC, is it? We understand that's really difficult. I mean, I think as well that probably it's really difficult with all of these questions, because we naturally jump the gun almost and then think about the substance of it. But what you're asking actually for us to vote is the proposal to put that to consultation, isn't it? I think that's the question that we're well, that's what we're voting on, is what do we put to on the consultation. Paul?
Yeah, and I think just to be clear, I think the question has to go to consultation. The local authority has to request it because of the deficit position, and the Department for Education would think it would be really strange if you didn't consult on it. I'm just thinking that my point was as much around the context is really around the question that you're asking. So it's very clear. We know that we've got to consult on it. We know that it's the right thing to do to ask people, but just being very clear what we are asking them to do, to give up some money or to keep it in the school, so that the question's clear. That's really what I'm hoping we'll do from this discussion.
Yes, Paul, and I'm happy to take that to the sort of the MSEG group as well and ask other sort of directors of ed, in our statistical neighbours, how this is working for them and what they're putting in as well. So there's that consultation wider too, and then I'll take that away with finance colleagues as well. Thank you.
Yeah. But yes, because it is a do X or do Y question. That's really what you're proposing, isn't it? Do you support a transfer from into the high needs block, or do you support retaining that in schools? That's the question, isn't it? I mean, what you're arguing for, Paul, there is, I guess, a kind of a greater clarity about what those two options mean. Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think that's the important thing. I think because people will be saying, I would be willing to contribute under circumstances whether I have any degree of affordability. But if schools are feeling that they have no option but to say, I can't afford to do this, I think they need to be really clear, and I'm not, but that may just be me, about, I think it needs to be enumerated very clearly what the material impact would be if the transfer wasn't made, or put another way, how new costs might materialize for the school, which means that you're better off just agreeing to a retention. And I'm not sure that we're providing I know that's a hard thing to put in to try and evidence, but I do think I think that's how it does have to go with those kinds of materials, surely. Otherwise,
No,
we get
yeah.
technology.
Yeah, happy to take
agreed.
that back.
Yeah, agreed, Andrew. I mean, even if it's not something that's really, I appreciate you might not be able to say, well, if you don't agree to it, then this gets cut. But I think what you can say as a point of principle is actually, if you don't agree to it, that means a reduction in services.
Which will have to be paid for and covered in a different way.
Yes, in a different way. Exactly. Rob, I saw your hand up and down there, I think.
Yeah, I was kind of just asking the same question as Andrew. And sometimes, if I'm really honest with you, when you're setting things out for head teachers, if you can set it out in a really practical black and white way and I know you can't really, but can say, okay, you don't make that transfer, but these are some services that may not be there if you don't do that. Then you give them something practical to think about, and I think that potentially might help them shape their response to the consultation. The consultation's got to go ahead. You can't not consult on this because of the size of the deficit. I recognise it's seen as more of a drop in the ocean than what Andrew said earlier on. It used to be a really significant remedy to it, but it's not that anymore. But I think we would be foolish as a local authority if we said, oh no, we're not even bothering thinking about a transfer of funds. We have to think about a transfer of funds. But I think you are pretty likely, in my view, to get a lot of no's from head teachers. I'm not interested in that. I don't want to do that. And I think you have to think about your consultation, and Paul's made a good point here. I think you have to think about the content of your consultation that says, it's just too easy for head teachers to say no to it. And if you say no, what are the ramifications of saying no? And therefore, and I know that's hard actually, Amanda, to kind of say, well, we don't know really specifically what they are at the moment, but I think people have to think about that before they easily just say, no, I don't want that transfer between the two blocks. More of a comment than a question, I think.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Rob. We'll go to Amanda and then we'll move to a vote.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to sort of summarize all of that. I completely understand. I think historically this paper has come as is, with those options. And I think, it is right that we have this debate in the context that schools are in now and the financial position that schools and also local authorities are in, setting against that backdrop of increasing need. So yeah, happy to take that away and then have a review as well to see actually what it might mean if we didn't have that. So again, I recognise that too. It gives head teachers and the additional information about what it actually means. We're trying to sort of, quantify it, which it doesn't do as a yes, no question. So happy to take that away and just evolve the paper for future years as well, really. So thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. So we'll move to a vote. This is for all forum members, and it's a vote to include the proposal to transfer the 0.5% from schools block to the high needs, subject to some of the amendments that we have talked about there. So all those in favour of that appearing on the consultation, if you could raise your hand, please.
Yep, thank you. That's unanimous.
Great, thanks. We'll go to item 15, which is school effectiveness de-delegation. And again, this is for maintained sector only.
But as if I'm just listening to my own voice. So I'm just really, again, around the de-delegation, around the school effectiveness team, just really highlighting again the work that obviously they do as a team, and the first page really explains the process and what that's set up for. 108 and 109 just really talking about the offer that was in place last year and the ways in which they've supported maintained heads and the way it's strategic and a universal level. I'm just going to skim a little bit as you've had the papers because I'm conscious of time, so please do stop me. 110 and then 111, again, just go into more detail really about what's been offered and some of the events that have taken place. And I've just put in a little bit of information in line with the judgments, using sort of the terminology while we're in sort of the transition with Ofsted, and added some data around that and some of the outcome data. And then really just moving through to some of the new things for this year, just to clarify the new education improvement framework, the new traded offer, both of which I included. I asked Raj to include just so that you could see those and you were cited on those, so that you can see the increase as well that we're offering for the, for the funding. So the proposed steps again are that they're proposed to consult on the inflation in line with the 4% pay increase. So that's moving to 14.2 per pupil. And it's noted that the school improvement contributions from the DSG, which was known as the Local Authority Monitoring Grant, so the previous LAM grant, ceased in April 23. So without this resource, we wouldn't be able to continue that service. So the recommendations are that primary maintained school forum members are asked to agree to the proposal to consult on an increase, and again that the secondary members do as well. So this is a request to consult in the paper, and then the outcomes will be brought for a decision at a later date.
Thanks, Amanda. Any questions or comments on that, Paul?
Thanks, James. Again, I think it's a great paper, Amanda. Very comprehensive. The only one thing I wanted to ask is whether you tied it or could tie it into the DFE's, the kind of RISE program, or just kind of mention that or shadow along, and whether you can access that as well, because that I know that will get established and is increasing. But other than that, I thought it was really good and very comprehensive offering.
Thank you.
Great. We'll move to a vote again. It's not a vote on the actual decision, it's a vote on the proposal to put it to consultation. And this, I think, again, we split this into primary and then secondary maintained, with a proposal to consult. So for primary maintained members, all those in favour of the proposal as outlined on page 114, if you could raise your hand, please.
Thank you. That's unanimous again.
Right, thank you. For secondary maintained, a proposal to consult as outlined on page 114. Thanks, Catherine. That's also unanimous. Amazing. Thanks. Great. Next one, I think a slight change to the presenter on the agenda. This again is maintained schools, and it's de-delegation re school insurance services. And I understand Sarah is going to talk to this.
Yeah, you can't see me. I hope you can hear me. You can't see me because I've got camera issues. Again, I'm mindful of time, as everybody else sort of said before. So I'm assuming that you've read the paper. So I'll just take you through it quickly and then take any questions. As you said, it's relevant to maintained schools. Provision is exactly the same as previous years in terms of the insurer. We're just waiting on the rates. Unfortunately, they don't produce their rates until the RPA produce theirs, so that's likely to be in December. So in terms of the options, it's on the proviso that the insurer rate is less than the RPA when I get to that. So two options: continue with the de-delegation for the maintained primary and secondary schools on that proviso, with a traded service to other settings, and option 2 are fully traded services to all settings. Sorry, I went very fast there. Any questions?
No, that's fine. The only thing I was going to ask is this another one where it's different for primary and secondary maintained? They don't have to both decide the same thing. Is that correct?
I don't know. From my point of view, I don't know. That's a school forum issue, so I don't know. Before, I just had a decision.
Raj, do you or Amanda know if that has been?
I wouldn't. You go, Raj.
Oh, no, sorry. Oh, no, I was going to say I'd have to defer to you on that. I'm not quite sure if that needs to be split as a vote.
I think. Go ahead.
Can I come in? It has to be split between primary and secondary. All the delegations need to be.
Thank you, Yoki. Voice of authority there. I like it. That's good. Thank you. Any other questions for Sarah or comments? So again, it's a vote for the proposal to go forward rather than the actual decision itself. So primary maintained members, if you'd support the proposal and the options available on, I think, page 190 going forward, if you could raise your hands, please.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks. And for secondary maintained, thank you, Catherine. A vote in favour of that going forward. And you'll be relieved to know the grand finale is back over to you, Amanda, for consultation, read, top-up funding, bandings, and proposals there.
Thank you. So this paper, being mindful we've only got a couple of minutes, it is really a piece of work that I think is long overdue around looking at banding reviews and looking at top-up funding. And there's a recognition that as a local authority, we're perhaps less in the sense of other local authorities and our neighbours. So I believe that a consultation was initially discussed last year within the council, but it hasn't necessarily progressed. So this is a piece of work that we're doing that is in line with MTFP at the moment to consider the proposal of increasing banding, increasing the top-up funding, also obviously being mindful of the white paper and not really sure what that might be. So skipping over various points, but going to the recommendations are that Schools Forum notes the need for a banding review and the need to take an overhaul around that. What we really need to do is create one set of a matrix where actually we have one set of banding from 0 to 12, for example, as opposed to separate entities at present. I think that will give clear transparency. And that should also give those maintained spaces who are supporting colleagues that perhaps are waiting for more specialist provision, more funding that's in line with what that young person might get in another provision, because I think that often causes young people to say, well, schools to say no because they can't really fund on the current banding. So it's an opportunity to overhaul and look at that, and that it is working its way through internally at the moment. So proposal is to undertake the review. So it's an information piece really to understand the SEM funding and how it's then presented and to go through forum. It's, as it Anne noted in 6.1, it's not yet possible to know the implications because we need to go through this process. But also obviously drawing attention to the fact that we have a statutory duty to ensure that sufficiency and ensure that we can secure that suitable placement for children with educational healthcare plans, whilst also being mindful of the efficient use of public funding. So I think that there's that sort of rub as well, really, and that acknowledgement of that. But I think if there's an options paper that we're currently putting together to go through that exec, is the option of not doing anything, as we've alluded to in other papers, isn't going to improve our situation. So this will hopefully mean that schools can work towards more of an inclusive space, can work towards a space where, going back to Catherine's comment, we have got schools that are saying yes, even if it's a yes, but I can't do this bit. We're having those conversations. We're looking at how we can fund, because primarily we want young people to be in mainstream spaces in that inclusive environment, and then to keep those specialist places for those young people that really do need to be in that space.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Can I just clarify? So you're not looking for a vote on this as a concept. It's more for information and I guess a kind of informal approval to continue with that work.
Yes, it's also just a site forum on that, really. So that's what we're doing, so that you're aware that we're taking steps to try and mitigate some of the pressures as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Rob?
Further information will come through later when we get to that stage, but it's just really to keep you cited.
Yeah.
Thanks, James. Mine's a really short question, actually, just on this one. You referenced the fact that any review would take probably at least a year to conclude, but you also recognise that our statistical neighbours, our actual geographical neighbours, West Northants, have completed a review which took 2 years. Do we have any kind of key recommendations? Because I would be surprised if we'll see something that's too dramatically different from what's perhaps we may do, but from what has come from the 2-year review that West Northants Council has done on this. Do we know any of their key recommendations from it?
Yeah, I've asked their executive director for their paper, and that's been shared, and the colleagues here are working through that as well. So we're going to have future sessions where we just discuss as well what the outcomes were, the engagement pieces that they did, so that we can learn from that and not have to, as you say, reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, James. I think, Amanda, one of the key things here will be being very clear on the terms of reference and what the objectives of it were. When West Northants engaged in this, it was very much around they had no bandings. They basically had, I think it was 240 different funding agreements as opposed to a set banding, which is slightly bizarre because with special school colleagues, there always has been a set banding in place. And so essentially being clear on the terms of reference and what you're hoping to get out from it, and then how you move to it, because that was one of the things that was learned, was effectively when you've got a position that you know that you want to move to, is how you move to it in a way that is supportive, where you are moving down funds, but also to a point that it's not, it's getting that fairness and equality. So I think the terms of reference are really, really key to get right for this.
Yeah, and I think just to come back on that, I think there are a lot of exceptions arrangements at the moment, recognising that there are challenges, and again, there's questions around the equity around that and the transparency. So I think there's a real recognition within the service that this is the next step. And I think having worked through it before in other local authorities, having that clear, step ladder, as it were, that it's all in one space. It's really clear for specialist provision, but it's really clear for mainstream inclusion as well, and those providers. So they can perhaps take on additional pupils with additional needs, because we do recognise there's sort of 300 children that are waiting for placement in specialists. So how can we fund that better to be successful? So I think that's the real direction of travel, to keep that in that inclusive space, but again, around that equity. So thank you. I will take it forward.
Yeah, I agree with that, Amanda. And I think, I also wonder whether it's how you could use some of those heads forums as well to kind of say, as part of those changes to bandings, actually what you are recognising within there is that it's a way of working together in partnership, which doesn't, it's difficult because it's slightly against kind of what EHCPs were set out to do, but it doesn't say, well, actually what we're going to do with every single EHCP is add up all the pounds and the pennies and make that work, because actually that becomes impossible as a system. And to think, if you've got a fair banding funding that everybody buys into, I think it's that bit that's kind of really important as a way of working, so that you try and avoid the conflict that can exist between NNC and schools, where they feel that they're in kind of conflict about kind of the level of funding that's there, that there's a kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, a fair banding funding or an agreed banding funding, that actually everyone thinks, well, I know what this means and what it is and how it's worked out, rather than saying, well, I'm going to look at every ECP and calculate it to the nearest penny and then say what works, what doesn't. I think that has to be the way everybody works together and makes the system work as well as it possibly can.
Yeah, and I think that way as well, it moves away from it being space, place and space, because actually what you want, if you've got 5 or 6 children who are hearing impaired or children who would benefit from speech and language, you hire a speech, that's part of what you do. You move the money away from being child specific. And actually, I think we just generally then look at funding in a different way, which creates a great amount of funding as well, because you're not attaching X to a child. You're looking at your collective provision mapping and seeing what needs you have, and then you're resourcing that need provision as opposed to resourcing each child individually. So I think there's a big piece of work around that I think will be really beneficial.
Definitely. And I know we've talked before about, how you make sure that the professional is still at the heart of that decision making. Yeah, agreed. Any other further questions on that? Great, thanks, Amanda. And any other business? Great. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions, your stamina and your fortitude as well, because I know that's a huge agenda. So, we're 10 minutes later than scheduled, but thanks ever so much. I really, really appreciate it. And have a good rest of the afternoon, and see you at the next Schools Forum. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, James. Bye.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.